I pledge allegiance followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moment of silence, please. Thank you. All right, we need to adopt the agenda.
I move to approve the adopt the agenda, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second that.
Motion to approve in second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Adopt the minutes.
As has been the case over the last several months, I've broken this into two agenda items. One for the minutes from your last meeting. Those minutes aren't ready. If you recall, it was a 9-hour meeting. So we'll get those to you next month. The other item is adoption of back minutes. And for that, you have two sets of minutes. One is a 2-day meeting that occurred on February 8 and 13, 2017, which was an FY18 budget work session. And the other is a June 7, 2017 meeting during which interviews were held with building official candidates. Those minutes are included in the packet for board and public review. And happy to take any comments the board has or approve them as presented.
Any additions or corrections?
Mr. Chairman, are you looking for a motion to approve both sets? Or do you want to do one at a time? In the past meetings, we've approved several at the same time these back minutes, and certainly can for this as well. Yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve the back minutes of February 8th and 13th, 2017, as well as the minutes of June 7th, 2017.
I'll second it.
Motion made and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Then I'll abstain as well as that creates my time on the board, please.
Pardon?
I will abstain because that predates my time on the board, please.
Just want to say the board has reached a monumental point, those being the last two back minutes that exist. So you are completely caught up with the exception of September. Mr. Curry, do you have a final tally on the cost to the county? I know we budgeted $10,000. I don't have it before me. It's the same number I reported several months ago. The remaining work was done by staff, so it was $7,000 or so. Okay, thank you.
Still have to do the last one.
They're not available.
All right, now, next item is public comment. Anyone wishing to speak will have the opportunity to do so. Simply raise your hand to be recognized. When recognized, please stand and state your name and the district that you're in. And I now declare the public comment open. First come, first served. Yes, go ahead.
Up there or here?
This is usually better.
Okay. My name is John Capioli. I'm from the Hampton District. find it a shame that I had to actually come to a supervisors meeting in order to discuss this, but circumstances force it. I've been having a problem with some folks, including Mr. Frazier here, in regards to my property. And Mr. Frazier has taken it upon himself to actually go above and beyond what would be normal. Mr. Frazier has been involved with flying, or his constituent, along with Mr. Frazier and Mr. Connor, have taken to flying drones over my home and taking photographs. And then turning
I
them in.
normally don't interrupt, but that's not correct. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Actually, sir, I have emails that you attached those photographs to. In addition to that, I'm also here because Mr. Frazier is leaning on the zoning administrator when she just came to work. She just started her new job. He disagreed with what her findings were, and I don't feel that it's the supervisor's place to lean on and try to change her determination. And again, Mr. Frazier has decided that he wants to get into backroom arguments with Mr. Goff and insult the man. And as I quote, the statement bothers me the most. I do not question the idea that Art Pitt said these things about my property being in compliance. Peter did similar stuff before him. The problem here to me is Art is the county attorney, not the zoning administrator. It is your decision given to the property owner that counts. Anything that Art told him is really meaningless. And of course, you all know this. I'm just aggravated. If this really happened, then Art needs to be put in his place so he doesn't continue in Peter's steps. For a board supervisor to speak like that in an official document, which I received through the Freedom of Information Act last week, I think is really bad. This doesn't speak well.
That's fine.
And not last but not least, again, an official document to Ms. Somers. You want to refer to me. And your spelling was just fine in the document 2 days before of my name, Capielli. I've lived with it for 54 years. It's kind of hard to spell sometimes. But once you spell it correctly, it's pretty easy. So for you to turn around and start referring to my wife as B. Crapioli offends me personally. And to follow up on this, I've already gone to the Sheriff's Department. There is an open investigation with your name on it, your constituent's name on it, and Mr. Connick's name. So we'll go from there. If you have something to say, you could have come talk to me. I'm an open person. I don't have a problem. But to turn around and use your official place to start getting involved in something that's already been settled and then push on the poor girl that's just started her job. And if you've got a problem with somebody, go see them in person. I was close enough for you to take pictures. Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak?
I have nothing to say in particular, but I need to pass these out. These are letters.
Give your name and.
Oh, sorry. My name is Sandra Ramsey, and this is regarding Benvenue Road. It's just a letter to add to your file. And Chairman Welch has a copy, as does the zoning administrator, the zoning administrator as well as you, Mr. Bird. We have copies. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. All right, so it should have been 5. That's the next one. Thank you. But I have nothing to say today.
Anyone else? Anyone else here to speak? Clerk, public comment, close. About our school. Dr. Green.
Well, good afternoon. We do have this bright, shining orange, yellow orb in the sky that we haven't seen for a while, so that's always a positive. Didn't know that we would ever get out of all that rain. But greetings from your friends in Parenterland. Last week was very eventful at our CPS as we were celebrating Homecoming Week. Our homecoming game against Madison was Friday night, and the game was very well attended. And the homecoming dance was Saturday night, and our kids looked amazing, and they also conducted themselves with the type of classiness that we would only expect from our young people. If you're friends, if you follow us on Facebook or Instagram, you can see all the marvelous pictures of that. And they just were stunning. Last week, Rappahannock County Public Schools participated in Start With Hello Week. It's a nationwide call to action sponsored by Sandy Hook Promise, designed to address the epidemic of social isolation. Social isolation is that overwhelming feeling of being left out, lonely, or treated like you're invisible. Young people who feel this way may pull away from society, struggle with learning and social development, or choose to hurt themselves or others. Start With Hello Week emphasized a fun and easy way to create a culture of inclusion that values each individual at school, enabling students to make a difference with their peers in a simple, fun, and impactful way by encouraging them to take small but powerful actions to promote connectedness and inclusion, and to identify and help others who are showing these signs of social isolation. All week, students in both schools participated in a Spirit Week in conjunction with our Homecoming Week, each having some type of inclusive activity that we took from the Sandy Hook Promise curriculum or activities. Students wrote positive messages on sticky notes for their peers. Peer mentors from the RCHS Pride program ate lunch with younger students at the elementary school. Daily announcements were made giving students strategies for engaging their classmates. Young students wore name tags and were asked to say hello to somebody they didn't know and learn their name. Students were also encouraged to sit with different friends at lunch, and teachers incorporated some of these activities promoted by Sandy Hook Promise into their classroom activities. All in all, it was a very positive week for our school culture. In conjunction with Start With Hello Week, the schools, in partnership with the Rappahannock County Sheriff's Office, held a school safety forum to talk about current issues regarding school security and the strategies that we use working between community agencies to ensure the safest learning environment possible for students and staff. The forum was a panel discussion that began with our high school SRO, Deputy Mark Currents, who gave an overview of the current method of preparing for an active shooter event, which is called ALICE, which is an acronym for Alert, Lockdown, Barricade, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. After the ALICE overview, panelists were asked questions that were compiled from the most frequently asked inquiries received by the different agencies over the last 2 years or so. Panelists were myself, Sheriff Connie Compton, SRO Deputy Mark Currents, Principals Jimmy Swindler and Ben Temple, Social Services Director Jen Parker, Assistant Superintendent Carol Johnson, and Emergency Services Coordinator Kevin Williams. The evening ended with an opportunity for the audience to ask the panel any remaining questions. And thank you for Supervisor Smith for attending. Thank you very much. We did have that severe weather alert that came right as time hit with the thunderstorm, so attendance wasn't as we would have liked, but it was still beneficial, I think, and the paper was there, so hopefully we'll have a nice write-up of that. Expanding on services, we have been in collaboration with the National Counseling Group, which is a service that we currently receive our therapeutic day services in schools, as well as some wraparound counseling services. If you remember, we have been on this risk factor for quite a while that we have very, very limited counseling services and mental health services in the county. And NCG, through some of our special ed services, has agreed to actually provide some services 2 days a week in Rappahannock County, not just for our students, but for our community. At no cost to us, but we need to find space. So that's something I want to bring to your attention, that we need to be working with you on. If we can find some space, they can take care of the billing, and not just Medicaid and Medicaid expansion, but they can do the billing for outpatient services as well, regular insurance billing. So this is huge for us. I was begging for 1 day a month even, for even telepsych, I'll take anything. So for them to come to the table with 2 days a week is a huge service to our community. So you can be thinking about that and ways to find some space. It has to be an office space that can hold up to 10 people in a waiting area. And then of course a private room for consultation and counseling services. Let's see, our new athletic director, Mr. Daniel Knobs, has been with us now 2 weeks, and he's already bringing new ideas for enhancing our athletic program. He comes to us with 15 years experience as an assistant AD, and this experience is already making a difference. Mr. Knox has already had to deal with his fair share of rescheduling events because of wet field conditions, and he's done a great job with that, and we look forward to all he will accomplish this year. The State Department of Education last week released the official school accreditation reports, and they're now available online at the BDOE website. And as we had stated a while ago, since I guess about May, our preliminary scores were accurate, and we are in great standing, scoring at level 1, which is the best possible rating in all of our categories on the new accreditation system. So we're very, very proud of that. So congratulations, your public schools are fully accredited. This week we have parent-teacher conferences, Thursday and Friday. Thursday is an early release day. Friday is no school for students. We have a lot of home events this week, so please come out and support your Panther athletics. Tonight, JP football plays at home. And I think that game's 6 p.m. Yes. Tomorrow night, come out and see our volleyball girls tear up the court. They're phenomenal. JP, JV, and varsity, all games happening at home beginning at 4:30. JV at 6, varsity at 7. Then come out and support our football team, cheerleaders, and amazing Panther band with Friday Night Lights this Friday. Gates open at 6:30. Game beginning at 7 p.m. And finally, the alternative program to Head Start, taking place at CCLC, which we've generously funded and made those funds available, has been going great. We have a full class of 18 students that would have qualified for the Head Start program. We also had 5 that were in limbo, which were slightly over the poverty level for Head Start, but still under the 150% poverty mark. So we were able to find funding through Headwaters for 2 additional students. So we're up to 20, so there's still 3 that we're working toward finding funding for. And we are also looking at alternative methods for funding the program for an additional year. I know Jen and I are looking at mixed delivery preschool grant for next year that could possibly fully fund the program if we're found eligible. And then also, of course, getting that Head Start funding back, because our numbers show something completely contradictory to what was shared through our other community organizations. So, on behalf of those students and at CCLC and all of us who've worked on that, we have a little gift for you from them. So thank you from them. These are their little handprints. They're cute. And those families were just so, so appreciative of what you did. So we thank you for that very much. All their names, you might want to frame that. This was huge for those families, so thank you so much. Do you have any questions for me?
Remsley, we're not going back to Skyline Cap next year, are we?
No.
That should have sailed, correct?
Oh, yes.
Thank you. Good. That's a good answer. What about People Incorporated? Are they?
They're in conversations with us right now and
Conversations.
looking at strategies to try to bring back that funding if possible, yes.
Okay. Through them?
Yes.
Is that how that would work? Okay. Yeah, I'm not asking you to break any confidences of contract discussions or anything, but.
No, so that's, we're looking at those options and any other ones because, you know, we can't rely on just one source of federal funding. That's never a good idea. So we'll look at every option we have and go for it if we can.
And People Inc. does support, run Head Start in other localities.
Right.
They do.
They are, people, just to clarify, People Inc. is Rappahannock County's community action program, and so I'm the board member for Rappahannock County for People Inc. And so I'm working closely with Rob Goldsmith, and so we're already looking at how we're going to move forward with Head Start. And initially, we'll start with the early Head Start program in hopes that we can bring back the 4-year-old program, but it's going to take a lot of work because of the data that was provided to the feds for Head Start from Skyline Cap, but we are working to clean that up so that we can bring that program back here.
So Shannon, help me out with the National Counseling Group. Can you tell me a little more about that, the group that's coming in for 2 days a week?
Yeah, they're the group that we currently use for our therapeutic day treatment services in the schools. And they also can provide other services as needed through our Title IV grant, for instance, if a student that may not be found eligible through regular wraparound services and special ed needs some counseling services, and we do have a Title IV grant that will cover that. They're ones that can come in, and they have approached us with this ability to do that. We have been saying that we need this for some time for our students, but they said we can even do better and offer it for your community if you could find a space for us. Then, it's something to look at. We do have a draft MOU that I sent over to Gary, to Mr. Curry to look at too, to see how we might be able to look at that, but it's an option.
So it's obviously something beyond the school. It's
Yes, it would. This is very good.
Yeah, as we work through CSA and other programs, we just don't have local delivery of these sort of services.
Right.
And of course, Mr. McGrath may speak to local delivery of some of these sort of services in just a moment. But we want to have as many opportunities as we can. And if we could find a local facility for them to provide those services, they're willing to come in and do it. We don't have one in our back pocket, but something to look for.
Thank you.
I just wanted to commend you on the quality and the participation, that was so well bought into in that public safety panel that you put together. It was very informative. I wish it had been better attended. And I hope if it's put on again, that maybe it would be recorded, because it's really important information. And I found it very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I enjoyed them coming along too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Presentation, CSB.
Mr. Jim McGrath is here from CSB. As you recall, Mr. McGrath introduced himself to the board as their new executive director a few months ago. All the months went together.
Yeah, sir. April 9th was the official start date. So.
And he's provided me with a presentation, so you can get pulled up.
It's not fair coming after all the little handprints and all that type of stuff. Everything that good stuff. Thank you. I appreciate you letting me come and talk to you today to present the annual plan for the Community Services Board, as well as the annual plan for the Area Agency on Aging. As I think people are aware, we are a combined organization, which is unique in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Excuse me. And just a real quick note too, I did include our mission statement on the front page of the presentation, and I'm only going to point it out just because it is a slight change in our old mission statement. We were able to have a retreat with our board of directors about a month and a half or so ago now. And one of the things that organizational we did want to do and make as a point of emphasis in the coming year is our mission statement used to say to improve the quality of life in District 9. And most people don't know what District 9 is. But we changed District 9 to really spell out Culpeper, Fauquier, Madison, Orange, and Rappahannock counties. Is really a point of emphasis is our commitment to making sure as an organization that we are providing services in those counties and meeting the needs of the residents of those counties. As I think most people are aware, the Community Services Board is the mandated provider of community behavioral health services. And I'm not going to read through all these slides in the interest of time. You have the information, so I'll just kind of go through a lot of this information quickly and really just want to answer any questions that the board might have. But yeah, I think as people are aware, we are the community behavioral health services provider. We are mandated to provide crisis services, case management, some other services as you will see. And then for the area agency on aging, our emphasis is on those seniors age 60 and older with special attention to those who are at risk of being isolated or institutional placement.
And let me just note, I will I'll go ahead and forward this off to the board after the meeting.
Just a very quick review of some of the initiatives that we completed in the past fiscal year that were presented by my predecessor in the areas of prevention. And one of the key items there I would like to point out is the Revive trainings. Revive trainings are a partnership that we have with the Department of Health to provide Narcan training to community members to be able to recognize and actually treat a potential opioid overdose. And at last count, I believe we're over 150 individuals who have been trained and we've dispensed Narcan to those individuals. In addition, we opened up an outpatient-based opioid treatment program that provides med-assisted treatment. We do know that med-assisted treatment is a more effective method of treatment for the opioid crisis, and being able to open up for the people of this 5-county region a true med-assisted treatment program out of our Culpeper Behavioral Health Clinic, I think is a very positive move forward. Also in the area of mental health services, the expansion and the continuation of our crisis intervention team training. That is a training that we provide to local first responders to be able to respond effectively when coming upon someone who is in a mental health crisis. And currently we have trained over 150. We just finished another one, so that number's a lot bigger than 149 at this point in time. First responders in our community so that they can respond appropriately to a behavioral health or mental health crisis. Additionally, in the past year, I think of significance is the initiation of the Rapid Access Program. And the Rapid Access Program is a same-day triage, so that if someone does have a behavioral health crisis need, they are seen on that day and triaged by a behavioral health professional to make sure that they get their needs earlier met. Before the implementation of Rapid Access, I understand that the wait time could be 3 or 4 months between calling and saying you were someone who needed behavioral health treatment and being able to get an appointment. We have now gotten that wait time down to about 2 weeks for about 55% of the people that we see. Our goal is to have that within 90%, so that anybody who identifies as needing any type of mental health or behavioral health treatment will get that within a 2-week period. And they're currently active. The only reason it's up still at only 55% for that 2-week is a shortage of clinicians. And we're kind of actively doing everything we can to recruit clinicians and to get that time frame down for people. In our area of services to individuals with intellectual disabilities, I always like to remind people that actually intellectual and developmental disability services is actually the largest budget segment of the Community Service Board, and that surprises a lot of people when we talk about that. But our Bridges Day program was opened in the last year, and again, we continue to expand our services for those individuals as well. In the area of aging services, I would just point out the VICAP program, the Virginia Insurance Counseling Assistance Program, which is a free community service that is designed for Medicare recipients to get free counseling on what is the best Medicare plan to meet their needs. And during the last fiscal year, we saved members of our 5-county region $231,524.97 in Medicare premiums. So I think that's a pretty significant free service that we are offering. And we actually had 35 individuals in Rappahannock County who took advantage of that service as well. Okay. In the coming year, some of the things that we are going to be working on as priorities are the continuation of the Revive trainings. In the area of substance abuse service, too, in the areas of treatment, we have looked at and are currently in the process of obtaining our licensure to provide 2 additional substance use programs, one called outpatient, intensive outpatient services, which is about 15 hours a week of really intensive counseling, medication management for people who are currently in recovery, and a program called partial hospitalization program. That is a 25-hour-a-week, very intensive substance abuse program and treatment program. And we hope to have those programs up and running in the next several months. So in the area of behavioral health, we are currently in the process of looking at relocation and renovations of our Rappahannock County Behavioral Health Clinic. It is well past its useful life. And again, some other types of things that you can read about, just little notes. For supports in areas for the people we support with intellectual disabilities, looking to increase employment options and increase community engagement opportunities for people with intellectual disabilities. We are currently also in the process of constructing 2 new homes through what's called the REACH program. And those are, I think, going to be significant positive resources for our community. Those homes are designed for either one home will be supporting children with an intellectual disability and also a behavioral health challenge who are at risk of hospitalization. And so those are crisis stabilization type programs. And one home will serve 6 children and one home will serve 6 adults. And really the goal of those is to keep those adults and children out of long-term hospitalizations. And in the area of aging and housing services, we are looking to expand our Live Well Virginia program to include some chronic pain management programs and fall prevention programs. You can skip the funding to supplement our call center. We already took care of that. That's already been accomplished. Our call center, which is a volunteer ride program that we are very actively involved with, had some budget cuts this year. We were able to secure additional funding to keep that going. And organizationally, some of our priorities, and one that this board I asked to consider, is Virginia Code 327501, which relates to board membership of the Community Services Board. By Virginia Code, 1/3 of the members of the board of a Community Services Board should be individuals who have received supports from the Community Service Board or family members. And that is a requirement that we do meet as an organization, but there's also part of the code that says that one member of your board should be someone who is currently receiving services, and that is a part of the code that we have struggled to maintain compliance with. My obligation is to inform you, which I just did, and I think as a county, one of the members of our board appointees' term is expiring, so I guess you consider that as you look to appoint a new member of our board in the coming year. Additionally, one of our very large priorities in the coming year is to be able to meet the demands of Medicaid expansion. And I know these numbers change at all different times, but approximately, I believe it was about 300 individuals, additional individuals. I'm looking for a head nod in the back, I got that. So, will be eligible for Medicaid, and I guess from an organizational perspective, to make sure that we are prepared as an organization to meet the additional demands that will place on our behavioral health and support clinics. Okay. I'm not going to read through this, but what you see here are the number of unduplicated individuals by service category who were supported last fiscal year and expected to be supported in this coming fiscal year. So if you look at it, just for an example, the first one is behavioral health on an outpatient basis. We supported 71 individuals who reside in Rappahannock County at our behavioral health clinic. And you see that the number in brackets below that is the total number of individuals seen in total throughout our organization. So for crisis intervention, you will see that there were 44 people who received crisis services with a behavioral health, and 15 people in the community who were in a substance use crisis, and then the total number. And so you have those data and information available, so I'm going to go through it piece by piece for you. And again, the same report for our area agency on aging. You see we have 44 regular members of the community who attend our senior center. You have 52 members of the community who have taken advantage of No Wrong Door, which is a one-stop phone number. It's a singular phone number for any member of our community can call. If they have any type of question on aging services for themselves or a family member, the person who answers that phone has the ability to create any type of referrals within the senior aging services and make sure those needs and support can be achieved for people. For fiscal year 2019, our organizational budget is about $2.5 billion. That's an increase of a little over $1 million from the previous year. And then below that, you can see in the pie chart exactly where those revenues come from. Again, most of our largest revenue source is from fees, and you'll see that on the next slide. And you you see there that most of our fees are coming from Medicaid at this point in time. Which you can see all the individual breakouts. Again, by service area, and again, as I said, you can see that intellectual and developmental disability services are the largest revenue source for our organization, a little over $8 million, about 7.5 on behavioral health, and you can see about 3.6 in substance use, and then you have administrative costs and so on, in aging services. So where do we spend it? $26 million, predominantly our organization's expense budget is personnel at about almost $15 million, equipment and vehicles, employee health insurance, and then lots of little things on the side there as well. Again, our organization this year, we have about 350 full-time equivalent staff, and where those staff actually work within our organization, we actually have about 400 employees. And our local tax funding for the fiscal year, again, we request a per capita rate of $6.69, and for the 7,431 members of Rappahannock County, you can see the contribution to Rappahannock County. And where you can find us on social media, our webpage, Facebook, all those types of things. And more than willing to answer any questions anybody might have about us as an organization.
Jim, with respect to the opioid crisis, in your prevention programs, you mentioned Narcan training. Are you or your providers working closely with our fire and rescue companies, or how
We do,
does that
yes.
happen?
We will provide Narcan training to anybody who asks. It is a partnership that we have with the Department of Health. The Department of Health actually provides the Narcan, the medication itself, and there's a kind of a universal prescription that anybody in the Commonwealth has to be able to carry Narcan once they've gone through the training. So we have done trainings with any community group. I just don't know specifically if your EMS services here have asked. I would be surprised if they haven't. If they haven't, please have them call us, because we will come out and do it at any point in time. It's about an hour and a half training, so it's not very long.
And then you also talked about transportation.
Yes.
For the elderly. Can you tell us how that's going? And I know there's a couple of, you have a ride type of organization, or you have, I mean, not an organization, you have a service, there are other services. I mean,
Yeah,
is that need being fulfilled?
Well, transportation, I don't know if the need is ever completely fulfilled for transportation. We're a member of the Foothills Area Mobility Service Payments. And, you know, I think so. The number on one of those sheets will actually tell you the number of trips that are provided to individual members of Rappahannock County. And I also have a list of, for seniors. Okay. So for Rappahannock County, there were 202 rides that were provided by volunteers. So I think it's going well. I think it's a well-used service. Is it ever enough? Probably not. But it is nice to know that the funding was able to be stabilized this year, because there was potential to have some funding cuts in that area.
So I have a challenge in connecting all the dots between CSB, our schools, our health department, our social services department. Is there, I realize you coordinate on some things, and on other things there's silos. I mean, from your perspective, is there enough coordination going on, or is there, especially as this Medicaid expansion kicks in, you've got to think that there's a lot of moving parts. I know there's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, there are absolutely a tremendous number of moving parts. I think on some things, coordination is very good. And like most things in some areas, I think we can do much better. I think with the Medicaid expansion, that's moving along pretty well. I think one of the items too that I didn't specifically mention, but I know one of the concerns from our organization was the lack of local community presence. We are currently finalizing some plans to be able to have CSB staff actually in every one of the counties, which I think will help with some of that. You know, we have case management responsibility for the behavioral health and intellectual disability services. Again, lots of people who are part of the Medicaid expansion, but actually having local staff here, which I think will make it much easier for the social services to coordinate the school district. You could actually have a person present. And hopefully those will be available in the next couple months. I think I was appreciating the space conversation. That's really the conversations. We've identified those individuals who will be out. It's where we're going to put them. And will we have the resources in place so that they can do what they will need to do from a connectivity and some of those types of logistical types of things, which I think will absolutely help. I think there are lots of different groups out there looking at very specific community needs. I think of like the CRUSH group, which is a 5-county group that is really looking at the opioid crisis and an effective regional community response to the opioid crisis. I believe the coordination is getting better, but I still think, that group's coordination with some of the other regional groups, with some of the different coalitions, making sure that we're not working parallel pathways still needs to be improved. And honestly, I think that's really what the role of the Community Service Board needs to be. And that has been one of my objectives in my first several months here is how can the Community Service Board be a better mediator for those groups to make sure that we don't have groups working on the same outcomes and objectives and not know what the other group is doing. And so I think it's getting better. I still think it has a way to go like most things, but I'm actually pretty optimistic at this point.
And the last thing, this national consulting group that Dr. Brimsley referenced to you, is that a lane in the road for CSB at all, or is that a separate?
Well, I think they are, I don't know a ton about them. I know they're a private provider organization. The fact that, I welcome anybody.
So you don't have anything to do with that then?
No, I think other than, they are partners in supporting people that, we might provide one service to and they will provide another service to. So.
Okay. Thanks.
I'll just note that Jim reached out to me asking if we had any space that might be suitable for his staff to come visit the county, and of course I'm not aware of ADA private space that could serve that need, but we're working to touch base with some of the folks in the community who may have space that can make available.
How much space do you need?
We'll take anything, not much, frankly, at this point in time. Our initial emphasis will be getting a couple of our case managers into the community, because they're really the ones who are the coordination of the care. They're the ones who have to have that kind of on the ground connection and collaboration with the different groups. So we really just need space for a couple case managers. So it could be fairly small at this point in time. It's not substantial at this point in time. And again, I think as we move forward, our goals will be and are to continue to, for lack of a better term, repatriate ourselves back out to all of the community. We're a 5-county organization that really provides services in about 1.5, 1 3/4 counties, and make sure that we bring services back to all the 5 counties equally that we represent based on their community needs.
I'm very glad to hear that. I've had someone have a sit down with me about exactly that. Even though we're on the list, there wasn't a physical presence in the county for the organization.
Yeah, it's
per se, and I know that'll be a great thing to report back, and I do appreciate it.
And I think the creativity that I think we are going to have to show as an organization. Certain services are very easy. The case management is a pretty easy service to bring back to all of the counties. Clinical services are a much bigger challenge. And having a volume, for lack of a better term, of business to support the establishment of an office is a real challenge for us, especially, you have 7,500 people in your county. One of the initiatives that we are frankly very excited about and working really strongly on right now is the ability to develop and operate a mobile clinic location. And this is a conversation that we've had with some of the other more rural counties that we support, is we know it's very challenging for people with a substance use disorder or behavioral health kind of maintenance program to get to our clinic locations, and so we will bring the clinic to them. And we've been working a little bit with the state, with another community service board in another part of the state who's already passed a bunch of these hurdles, but a mobile clinic presence that has clinicians on site, that has a mobile pharmacy, if people need medications, and those types of technologies that doesn't require us to establish a office location, but on 1, 2, depending on the need in the community, days a week to be a visible local presence in each of various communities throughout our region, I think would be a really nice thing.
How many days a week for the 2 case managers, you think, or how many days a month?
Our initial idea was a couple days a week to get us started, and then we'll see what the need and demand and all those types of things are. And it would be my goal that if you're a case manager supporting Rappahannock County, you would be stationed in Rappahannock County.
Great to hear.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the time.
Next item, finance. Treasurer's report.
The treasurer's report is included in your packet. Placed on the screen the cash balance graph, if you will. It's a good story, continues to be a good story. And the treasurer and commissioner of revenue worked very hard this year to get the bills out for real estate tax. And I think you can see the impact of that in this graph. You see the purple line for 2019 is actually already tipped up. In the past, the low cash money, cash month was September, and we managed to push that back to August, which is very good and hard work for those two officers. Overall, cash is just one part of the story, but it's a critical part, and if you can look back a few years, we're borrowing money to get through those low cash periods of the month. Beyond that, the expense report and revenue report is in the packet. Everything is more or less as expected. There are a few items here or there that are requiring a close eye, but nothing too exciting at this point in time. Happy to take any questions if you have any of the items included in the report.
I guess we keep going.
Okay, included in your packet are the accounts payable. There are 2 separate accounts payable. One for the mid-month of 9/17 and the other for today's date. The mid-month for September 17th is $31,153.77. And as you recall, in the last board meeting, you authorized us to pay VML, our quarterly share during mid-month. That's when it's a little higher than normal. And then also the October 1 is for $513,473.16. That includes your first quarter payout to your fire companies and your second quarter payout to the fire association. In addition, I want to note that included in the accounts payable is an item to pay Walker Jones for legal services for Bragg 1. There's some disagreement, I would say, on whether 15.2, Code of Virginia 15.2, 1520 provides all the coverage you need from a COIA perspective or not. However, you can very plainly make sure that there isn't an issue by expressing either in the minutes or otherwise that you recognize that there is a potential conflict and that as a group of 3 or more, you can act objectively to approve those. You can do that as part of these minutes if you'd like, and I've printed out the section of the code expanded if you'd like to look at it to help with that discussion.
I wish Mr. Goff hadn't taken this opportunity to leave, but I have a question I never got. I'd asked you, you said you would report it back, but I haven't got any information. What exactly is this $472.54 for Walker Jones?
Yeah, I apologize that I don't have that information. Or I can show you the invoice, but
It's unfortunate, I don't have any idea what's going on with Brad Warren. I'm supposed to vote on paying the bills, but I have had no communication about this. The last communication that this board made was to Mr. Goff is to seek terms of settlement. That was at the July meeting. And yet I understand, and I guess I'm going to have to repeat this, I understand this board, several members of this board were in court this past Tuesday, a week ago, and we, according to the newspaper, we may be in court again this week. But I've had no communication from anyone. And I wonder how that is. I'm required by statute to vote on paying these invoices, but I have no communication with anybody as to what it's about.
in passing with Mr. Goff before this meeting, he did tell me that the court, whatever trial this week was scheduled. I'm not exactly sure the details.
So, am I a member of the Board of Supervisors or a member of the Board of Acquiescence? Would you have any input on that?
I don't remember the Board of Supervisors,
You have
so
an
that's the
opinion on
question.
that? And I would really like to know what's going on. Mr. Chairman, can you elaborate?
I didn't think you were part of the break one.
Is it not called Bragg versus Board of Supervisors?
You weren't included in that.
I'm not a respondent. I'm not an individual respondent, but I am a member of the Board of Supervisors and have been since 1996.
All I know is your name was left out.
Mr. Chairman, I have brought this up several times. Why do I keep being left out? Well, what is the reason for this? Here's an example. As a member of the Board of Supervisors, two of us here are supposed to pay the bills today, but yet I know I can't speak for Ms. Smith, but I have had no communication about this. I even went to Richmond.
Well, Mr. Goff, I can't answer anymore.
Mr. Chairman, I went to Richmond when this case was heard before the Virginia Supreme Court, and when they announced it, they said Bragg versus Board of Supervisors, not Bragg versus individual respondents, and then list two gentlemen's names.
Mr. Goff, you have to answer that.
Well, you're the chairman of the board, and the last conversation this board had instructing the county attorney was to seek terms of settlement. What happened?
We didn't agree to the settlement.
Did you see a terms of settlement?
I saw a document.
What was that?
You mean the amount?
Yeah, I never saw an amount.
There was nothing really, what I would call official. It was a statement made and then another statement. And I think 40-some thousand was the last one.
I never saw that. How is it that I didn't see that?
I'm not the secretary. I have no idea.
May I ask a question, Mr. Chairman?
Well, I think there must be something wrong here, Mr. Frazier, because you were not included in that suit because you came in and changed your statement to the opposite of what it was.
It says
Wait a second.
Board of Supervisors
Well, your name was taken off that suit.
as an individual respondent.
There's only 3 of us there. Pardon?
As an individual respondent. It says Bragg versus Board of Supervisors, and then it names 4 individuals as respondents.
Well, your name was taken off because you changed.
My name was not taken off. My name is not an individual respondent. It says Bragg versus Board of Supervisors, and unless I'm unaware of something that transpired, I'm still a member of the Board of Supervisors. As a matter of fact, I have a letter signed by Mr. Goff and Mr. Luke saying that they represent me in that case. And now you're telling me that they don't? When was that rescinded?
I thought that was from the beginning.
Well, we're still there. After 2 years and almost $50,000, we are at the point we were almost 2 years ago. We're still there. I'm supposed to vote on these invoices, but I have no communication from the attorneys about what it is. You gentlemen are informed somehow, but I'm not. Yet, like I said, I have a letter signed by both attorneys dated in October 2016 stating that they represent me in this case.
Well, I didn't know that. Mr. Ludd, was that you had something?
I'm just wondering, Mr. Chairman, if this is a conversation we just should have with Mr. Goff. Is Mr. Goff going to return here this afternoon? I mean, and I don't know if it's appropriate to set this aside or what the appropriate term is, table it or whatever until such time that Mr. Goff comes here, because I think he can probably do a much better job of answering the questions from Mr. Frazier.
Right.
You know, Mr. Frazier has questions, so you should.
So you're going to pull these invoices out?
No, I think in terms of this particular invoice to Walker Jones, I remember reading a breakdown somewhere that part of it was in Bragg 1 and part of it was for something else.
That's correct.
The $300 is for Commissioner of Council.
Okay,
So
so we obviously hired them to represent us, they've obviously done some work.
But they weren't instructed to do any work. What work were they instructed to do?
Whatever lawyers do.
Well, no, that's not good enough. What were they instructed to do? Do you have any idea?
I was here for the little hearing, I guess.
But who instructed them to do that?
I don't know. It might be-
All right, that's the question I'm trying to get to.
I'm just going to say, Brian, if you don't let me finish my statement, how are you going to ever learn
But
anything?
I asked you a pointed question.
Yeah, I
Who
was in the
instructed them to
process-
do anything?
I was in the process of answering, but you apparently are not interested in hearing me out.
No, I'm interested if you'll answer that question. Who instructed them to do something?
The judge summoned them here to sit right there to present the case. I happened to be sitting over there when it happened. So they charged us for the time
The
that they sat
instructions,
there.
the last
The
instructions.
judge
they had-
called them in. He-
No,
he had a
the
time,
last
he had a
instructions
date.
from this board were to
Right.
seek terms of settlement.
Obviously failed.
So who instructed them to go further to court?
The judge.
The judge did not instruct them to go to court.
It's on the docket.
Lawyers have to put it on the docket,
Mr. Conner put it on the docket, apparently.
apparently.
Yes. That's what, he was here and he basically said he wanted to move forward with this. He knew what was going on. You all communicate and all she asked Mr. Conner.
I'm not supposed to communicate with him on this case. I have a letter from these attorneys stating that he's not supposed to communicate with me.
Well,
So now you're telling me he is supposed to.
I'm not telling you that. I'm just saying you could have.
No, you just said that. You said you
Yeah.
communicate.
I'm unaware of what communication you got from the other lawyers. I'm not nosing in your business. I'm just telling you what I know. You asked a question, I'm trying to help you out. If you don't want to listen, help yourself.
No, I asked you a pointed question. You still haven't given me a definitive answer. Who instructed our attorneys to go to court?
The, Ms. Bragg's attorney.
He
David
can't
Conner,
instruct our attorneys.
he most certainly, if he filed a suit,
You're saying that an outside counsel can instruct our paid attorneys on what to do?
you know, I really don't understand the legal system at all. I just know that Connick was here, our attorneys were here, and the judge was here, and they have another court they come to. They arrange that. So we're going to be charged for that too.
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask a question to Mr. Goff. Mr. Goff, there, question concerning the billing from Walker Jones concerning grade 1. And I don't understand how it is that y'all seem to have been in court this past Tuesday. The newspaper says that we may be in court on Thursday, but I've had no communication from you about that. And I have no idea what this $473 is for.
There should be an itemized bill. I saw the itemized bill.
But I haven't seen it. And the last instruction that the county attorney office had from this board was in an open meeting in July, and that was to seek terms of settlement.
Which I did.
I've seen no more communication except that one response from you, that there was no real.
Well, Mr. Connick has not given me a dollar figure. That's what I asked him for, was a dollar figure, and he just has not provided that. I can't make him do it.
Well, I guess my question is, then why are we all going to court when this board did not authorize any further action in that regard? And why do I not know that we're going to court?
Well, because Mr. Connick put it on the docket.
Mr. Connick put it on the docket.
Yeah. And he wants he wants to go ahead and try to resolve the case. So what happened was there was a scheduling press feed that was put on for last week. I believe it was Tuesday. And, or was it Thursday? Anyway, it was one day last week. Simply just to try to get a date to argue the preliminary motions that are still pending. And so in order to expedite that, I moved or got a case, a criminal case that was set for this Thursday, resolved. So now we get to come in on Thursday to try to argue and clean up all the pending dispositive pleadings that are still out there. There's a demur, then it's a multi-part demur, and there's a motion for summary judgment, and then there's Mr. Connick's motion to lift the discovery stay. So all those issues will be before Judge Parker this Thursday at 9 o'clock, so following the criminal docket, or 10 o'clock, I think. 9:30. Is it 9:30? So,
And how did you know how to schedule or reschedule any of these dates with your client without any discussion with them?
well, Mr. Connick and Mr. Brown have been in constant contact about the schedule.
But your client, the Board of Supervisors.
Well, these are scheduling matters, so that's something that the lawyers do.
We don't have to be here. I mean, we're not witnesses.
But as far as scheduling, if the board wanted to be there, we have no knowledge of what you're doing.
Mr. Glennie knows. He's not even on the board. How's that?
I don't know. That's what I'm asking the
You
question.
just said it was 9:30.
I asked Mr. Goff a question, and you're asking me a question. But my question is to Mr. Goff. How is it that some of these gentlemen on the board know, but I didn't know?
How what?
How is it that some of these board members knew about being in court this past Tuesday and maybe this coming Thursday, but I don't know about that? I had no communication from you.
I don't know. I don't know how they do.
You don't know how they know, but you don't know how I don't know. I thought, as the attorney for the Board of Supervisors, that you would keep your client properly informed.
On scheduling matters, that's normally not something you bring the clients in for. As far as this Thursday, I was planning on telling you all today, because this just got resolved, I guess Friday, that we were going to be able to have this argument. I sent Mr. Connick an email to that effect.
Mr. Connick agreed to it when he was here. Last
Right, but it was hanging in the air whether it was going to happen.
It was going to happen or not.
There was a
Next day
jury,
gonna be
criminal
November
jury
9th.
trial.
I understand that from reading the paper, but not from talking to you.
What's that?
I said, I understand that from reading the newspaper, but not from talking to you.
Well, I was going to tell you about it today.
You're going to tell me after I find out about reading it in the newspaper.
No,
You see my problem here?
they didn't understand.
I don't feel that you are keeping us properly informed. That's why I have a question about what this $472 is, because I've had no communication from you.
Well, I saw no need to communicate with you about the scheduling matter. And like I said, it was a pending thing. We didn't know until after the paper was published that this thing was actually going to go forward. Because it didn't get settled until Thursday afternoon. The criminal jury.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out how some of these gentlemen know about things and I don't know.
I don't know.
Well, how are they finding out about it? Do you have any idea?
I just told you, I have.
They don't come to your office? You don't call them or contact them?
I haven't had any contact with any of these guys about it, other than what was, some of them were here for the hearing on last Tuesday. So they were here in person and heard about it.
Right, but they have to hear about that hearing from somewhere.
And they didn't hear about it from me either. Because like I said, it's a scheduling matter.
Why don't we know that from our attorney?
Because it's a scheduling matter.
Well, wouldn't you want to know what your client's schedule is before you agree to schedule it?
If it was going to involve the testimony of the client, you betcha.
Yeah, he had to be here.
Mr. Chairman.
We didn't have to be here, but listen, let's get on with our business, which is approving the...
Well, the business is, again, who authorized Walker Jones to do something, and I'm trying to...
Mr. Harris, hold on a second.
You're interrupting me, sir. I asked a question, I still haven't heard an answer.
Order.
Mr. Chairman, if I may have the floor.
Yes.
On July the 2nd, the regular scheduled Board of Supervisors meeting, we passed a resolution, Parts A and Parts B. Part B specifically says that we continue the employment of the firm of Walker Jones to serve as co-counsel with the county attorney in the Bragg 1 litigation at a rate of I believe it was $175 an hour. It was $150 an hour.
July is when we passed, had a vote that we instructed the county attorney to see terms of settlement.
So we have a resolution employing Walker Jones to represent us on grant one. Clearly they've done work and they've presented an invoice. So given that we haven't employed them and we have a resolution to that effect, I'll make a motion that we pay the bills.
I still have a question, Mr. Chairman.
And I'll second.
Who authorized this particular work? Just because we employ somebody doesn't mean that they just go off accumulating invoices.
Well, we have a
Question
motion.
doesn't really concern you.
Yeah, I'm still asking this question. This is about paying this invoice. This is about paying this invoice.
Well, we have a motion and a second, I guess.
You're not running the meeting, sir. I've asked the chairman if we can't get to the bottom of this question, and Mr. Goff is sitting there and he's not answering the question. Who authorized this work?
I think that's what we just.
I got a chairman, I got a vice chairman, I got a county attorney, and none of the three of you can tell me who authorized this work.
We did.
When?
When we made the motion to hire Walker Jones, when they made the resolution to hire Walker Jones.
No, we didn't authorize this particular work. The last authorization we had to the county attorney,
If
wait a
we're
minute, Mr.
into-
Chairman, I have the floor. We authorized the county attorney to seek terms of settlement. When did that change?
I think Mr. Goff gave you that answer. It was not successful.
Maybe if you raise your voice, we'll get the point.
No, I have to raise my voice because you keep trying to interrupt with things that are not germane. I've asked a question, I expect an answer for the people of this county. Who authorized this particular work?
I assume, Mr. Frazier, when you hire someone to do some work, they're gonna bill you for it.
When it's authorized, Mr. Chairman. When it's authorized.
You mean hiring them wasn't authorizing them, is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, you just give them a blank check, is that what you're used to doing? You hire somebody and just hand them the checkbook? Is that what we're
We
doing?
hired someone at a certain rate, and now they're billing us some of it.
So we have no involvement in it after that point?
I have a motion on the table. and
I've asked a question, Mr. Chairman.
That question has been answered.
No, it has not. Who authorized this work?
That's your opinion, Mr. Frazier.
Mr. Chairman, if Mr. Frazier doesn't like the work that Walker Jones is doing on his behalf, he can certainly put a motion out there to fire him. If he doesn't like the fact.
That's not on the agenda. Paying this invoice is on the agenda.
And there's a motion and a second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Next item.
When are you going to answer the question, Mr. Chairman?
Not today, Mr. Frazier.
When do we get that answer, Mr. Chairman?
Why don't you make an appointment with these attorneys and let them answer?
I'm asking the chairman of this board in an open meeting with the county attorney here, who authorized this work? And you mean the public cannot get an answer to that question?
I didn't say that.
That's what you said.
You got.
You said make an appointment with them. That'd be outside of a public meeting. I've asked this question in a
Why do
public
you want to be
meeting.
so argumentative? You've already-
Because I want an answer, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, well, I'll say I authorize it, okay?
You don't have the authority to do that.
Right. Right.
So then how did this happen?
I guess when we signed the contract.
I guess.
When you voted aye, did you vote on for that?
No, I did not.
Okay.
Because I think we need to stop running up the tap on this thing.
Next item.
Just to be clear, your vote was nay.
My vote is no.
Next item on your agenda is a supplemental appropriation. The sheriff has requested, you may remember this from last year, it's a follow-on. Apparently we entered in a contractual agreement with Day-Pro Systems in the past for a records management system. That company no longer exists. The company at the bottom of that has been paying us back slowly for I think a long-term maintenance contract that they were unable to fulfill. This is the last installment, $1,000 that we've been paid back by this firm, and the sheriff is asking for the funding to be appropriated into her budget so it can be used for the intended purpose.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, point of order here, maybe that's the right way to say it. The last piece of business, we were handed out
piece of paper here about disclosure by local government officials and employees. Did we need to take action on this, Mr. Goff, in any way with respect to the vote that we just took on the accounts payable?
It's my opinion that you don't, but it doesn't hurt. Mr. Gary prepared a little statement to that effect, and it's not going to hurt anything for you to make a disclosure. But it's certainly up to each individual member if you choose to do so.
Do you want that in the form of some kind of an email or a written letter to that effect within a certain time period?
Yeah, if you can sign off on that and file it with Mr. Curry.
Yeah, if you can do it within a day, that's what the code says. Or you can state it for the minutes of the meeting.
That's something's right. I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Another supplemental appropriation.
Yeah, so you have date pro system, you need a motion from the board member to approve the supplemental appropriation that does not draw any funding from your general funds, just appropriate the dollars that were received from this vendor.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye also. Next item.
The next supplemental appropriation is to appropriate the funds from the lightning strike, insurance proceeds from our lightning strike from BML. As you're aware, on July 15th, we had some damaged equipment due to the lightning strike at our new sheriff's office. There were considerable expenses to get us back in service. Those are outlined here and also on the attached form. As you can see, we received $12,985.43 from VML. I'm seeking to have those dollars appropriated into the appropriate budget lines. Also, let you know that there is a $1,000 deductible, and there are some expenses to our building maintenance line that I'm not seeking reimbursement. It's just part of doing business, and we have a capable budget there. Later in your agenda, I'm asking for a small amount of funding from your contingency fund to shore up the emergency services line that is otherwise would be forced to eat some of that deductible. Rather than doing a supplemental appropriation from general fund.
So what kind of motion are you looking for here?
Move approval of the supplemental appropriation as presented in the form.
So moved.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Motion made and second, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carried.
The next item is supplemental appropriation requested by the Social Services Department for several items, including recognition of the increased workload for Medicaid expansion. In FY19, the governor has promised, and the General Assembly has promised, that we'll be held harmless for the Medicaid expansion, so that portion of the supplemental appropriation is fully covered with revenue. However, at the same time, Ms. Parker is bringing to you information of increased workload. She's here, and she will provide you some background on that before you consider her request.
Afternoon. How are you today? So we're growing by leaps and bounds in the community. Within our department, I think it's first important to understand how our budgets operate. We have two concurrent budgets with our local county budget and our state budget. So when we prepared our county budget in the beginning of the fall last year and we submitted it in January of this year, we were unsure if Medicaid expansion was going to pass. During this time, there were two other trends that I was starting to see and monitor, and that was within child welfare. One was the passing of the Families First legislation, and then we were having significant growth in our child protective services caseload and our foster care caseload. So Medicaid expansion did pass in the spring, and our agency was allocated $58,000 in anticipation of a possible increase of 300 cases for the Medicaid program. This figure does not anticipate the surge in applications that will need to be processed by our agency as a result of local walk-ins. So this $58,000 is a hold harmless supplement to our budget for this year alone. This amount was not included in our initial county budget, and there will be no local match for these funds for FY19 only. On the child welfare side, I've been closely monitoring the growing increase in the foster care caseload. Since January, our caseload has increased from 12 children to 27 children. Foster care cases have grown in complexity with legal proceedings, substance abuse issues, and sibling groups. Child Protective Service reports have also experienced an increasing trend in reports of abuse and neglect over the past 8 months. And based on our current trends, we do not anticipate a decrease in the child welfare workload in the near future. With Families First legislation beginning implementation in 2019, every locality across the state will become a trauma-informed community. Communities will have more of a prevention focus, and we will have to learn to support our children within our communities, within their homes, within their families. So a huge focus will become on developing our foster homes within our communities. Our workers will have to attend specialized trainings to become more trauma-informed. But this is all will reduce trauma inflicted on our kids that we're taking out of their homes, but we'll be reducing trauma by keeping them within their communities, within their schools, within the surroundings that they know. So this is also going to require dedicated support to the Family Services Unit to provide them guidance and supervision, as well as to ensure that our agency is staying abreast of the rapidly changing family services policy for social work staff. To accomplish all of what is needed within the department, we need 2 additional staff members. We've come to a crossroads where minimal staff can no longer meet the growing needs of our community and the mandated programs. To house additional staff, we need more space. We've heard lots about space in Rappahannock County today. There are no available commercial spaces large enough to meet the staff of my department. As a result, we need to make use of the areas in our building for new staff by making renovations, including the implementation of cubicles and workstations in the area we currently use as a conference area. In addition, we need to upgrade our phone system, as well as install data and phone lines, and we need a new phone system for more phone lines. To make all this happen, we need to increase our county budget by $150,000. Utilizing the $58,000 we received from Medicaid expansion with no local match for 1 year, the department is requesting $92,000 with a match rate of 34%. The county's match would be $31,200 to meet our needs for this fiscal year. Any questions?
You can find additional space?
I'm sorry?
You can find additional space?
Well, what we're doing is we're taking our basement area where we have, that we're currently using, we have a conference table in, we're taking that out, and we're hopefully going to be installing cubicles, 2 cubicles there, and then we have a rather large hallway area downstairs, and we're going to be putting 2 workstations there. So that'll be kind of like a plug-and-play area. And I actually spoke with Mr. LaGraff and offered one of that space if he had a case manager that just needed a person to print, use a phone, just do some basic communication. It's not a confidential area, so it wouldn't be able to be used for seeing clients. So we're adding 2 cubicle offices downstairs in our basement area, because we haven't been able to find any space large enough for us. Because we're currently at 11 staff members, and adding 2 would bring us up to more than anywhere in the county can offer right now. Gary and I have talked about it quite a bit, about trying to find a space for us, and there isn't any.
So the sad thing about this kind of budget is completely unpredictable, and sometimes the caseload just sloughs off on its own, and then suddenly there's more cases that come in, and there's no way of predicting it, no way of planning ahead for that, in a normal budget process.
And Ms. Parker and I spoke about that, and she has a pretty decent turnover in her office, unfortunately. And so going forward, she would be analyzing every vacancy to determine whether it needs to be filled or not, depending on where it falls in the organization, if the caseload were to drop off. The only other thing I want to note is that should the board want to do this, it is $31,280 local impact that I've shown on the appropriation form coming from your general fund balance. You could alternatively pull it from your contingency fund if you wanted to. We're only a quarter of the way through the year, so you can decide whether you want to do that, and then potentially have to hit general fund balance later in the year for something, or just go ahead and tap the general fund balance now if you want to do this. The treasurer's report earlier indicates that there are funds available to do this if the board wants to do this.
I was just going to ask a question somewhat germane. How fast are we approaching the 1% for
That is close, and we'll be probably scheduling a public hearing in December. We could do it in November probably, when the schools has their information together, but what I would like to do is bring that information to you so you can authorize the actual ad that I put in the paper before it happens. So that public hearing will be large to include all the federal dollars and carry over for them. But right now we're
for December?
For December, if you were to do this, you would still have $28,000 buffer to that 1%.
So a couple of questions on the current budget, Ms. Parker. I guess on the budget, I'm looking at the expense report that we just went through earlier, and it's the under public assistance, which I think is part of your budget. Correct me if I'm wrong. We've got a foster care line here. We budgeted $260,000 for FY19, but we've only spent $9,000 of it, 8.25%. And with the adoption subsidy, $31,000, we've only spent $700 of that, or just a little under 7%. So are those, I realize we're only a quarter into the FY, you may have, but are those numbers being taken into account when you're asking for these additional funds?
Those are programs, and we're looking at administration, staff and operations.
Some of those expenses are lagging a little bit until they eventually hit your budget. So just because we're a quarter of the way through the year, you're not necessarily seeing 3 months of expenditures already hitting that budget. That takes a while to trickle back through.
No, I certainly understand that. It just looked like it was either lagging quite a bit, or I wasn't aware that those were programs as opposed to.
It's very confusing, and actually when we go through this process for the budget amendment, Ms. Nick and I are working to change how the social services budget is shown to make it a little bit more clear on the local dollars that are being used. They are separate funds for social services and for CSA, 2 separate funds. So we'll clean that up a little bit. Didn't have a chance to do that in March when we were going through it. And it gets confusing because the match rate for all the different programs is different. Some of it's 100%, there's no local match. And so, just because it looks like there's capacity in a particular line, it's not real capacity because that's matched directly with revenue on the other side of the ledger.
Can you, excuse me, the CPS referrals, can you just, for everybody, clarify what CPS stands for?
Child Protective Services.
And then, Mr. Curry, Do you have a recommendation on which way to go on this, in the general fund or the other way?
I think at the end of the day, it probably doesn't matter. You have funds available to do this if the board wants to move forward. I've set the form up, I guess is my recommendation, to do the supplemental appropriation from fund balance.
The $55,000 extra that we gave to the CCLC, that came out of the general fund, didn't it?
Yes, it did.
If we're going to have to advertise for a hearing anyway, then we might as well just take it out of the general fund.
Right, right. Well, and that wouldn't play into this. That's based on how much you appropriate in expenditure. So regardless of where it comes from, we'll approach that 1%.
So if we're looking to move on, I'll make a motion that we approve this funding
As shown in the form.
as shown on the form.
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
Motion made and seconded, to the roll call. All right, motion made and seconded, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Next item on your agenda is the carry along item that I told you would use for your contingency fund that tracks what you pledged for that as a reservation. I'm asking you to add the $731 of deductible for the lightning strike that wasn't funded by GML to make the emergency services budget whole. That budget was not anticipating paying for these lightning strike repairs. We will only transfer those funds later in the fiscal year if it shows that the entire budget is incapable of meeting the need. But if we put a reservation on this fund now, then we'll know we have the capacity without dipping into the general fund balance.
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we add the $731 budget for lightning strike. And then we'll have to word these motions.
Reservation in your board contingency fund.
And I'm second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Appointments.
Moving right along.
The first item is just a carry along for your Agricultural and Forestry District Advisory Committee. You still have several available appointments on that board. No work to do until 2019, but as you're chatting at the corner store, keep this in mind, and there may be some folks who'd like to serve on this advisory committee. After that, you have the opportunity to appoint a member to the Broadband Committee. Mr. Brzezinski wants to introduce this, or would rather I?
I could take care of that. The Broadband Committee has an interim report that it's presented to the board here, I think under new business later in the agenda. Committee is going to continue its work. There are more things to be done. Ms. Margaret Bond, who is here with us this afternoon, patiently waiting in the back row there, has been a regular attendee of our committee meetings and has expressed an interest to join the committee. We did have a resignation, so we don't necessarily have a maximum number, but we certainly have an available seat. She's a member of the Piedmont District, and you have her application as well as, I believe, a statement of interest. So I guess being on the committee, I would put Ms. Bond's name forward for the nomination for the Broadband Committee.
Second.
Question. You told us, Mr. Brzezinski, twice in the last 6 months that you were looking at the Broadband Committee completing this work, and you mentioned the word disbanded at least once.
That's true, Mr. Frazier. That was discussed here in the past. We have a meeting on September the 17th of the committee and discussed that as part of whether or not the report needed to be a final report or whether that committee, which serves at the pleasure of the board, felt it could provide additional value and do more work as a committee. They would like to soldier on. They have a couple of recommendations for the board in their interim report. So I realize we may be doing this a little bit backwards, but we would hope the board would embrace the committee's desire to continue to do its work and welcome Ms. Bond on board as its next member.
Okay, motion made and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Congratulations.
The next item is for your Social Services Board. Ms. Parker is here and can provide some information if necessary. I had this on the agenda last month just to make sure the board was aware. Code of Virginia 632301 states that the members of this board serve for 4 years and may serve 2 consecutive full terms and then must transition on. Current member Deborah Flournoy, her term expires on November 5th, and she has served for 2 years, so she may not serve additional. You have 2 applicants that have come forward for this seat. Also note that the 632302 states that the board must have at least 3 members. So you have an opportunity to appoint more, and it may be something the board wants to look at in the future. But having 4 maybe is not always the best number. If you were to move it to more, you might consider 5 from a FOIA perspective. But with that, unless Ms. Parker has any input, you have Ms. Brooks and Ms. Payne have submitted applications for consideration.
It looks like we have 2 qualified people, but we also, the next appointment, we have a vacancy with nobody. I just wonder if the one not appointed to one would be interested in serving on the other. They're not the same position.
Mr. Frazier is speaking to CPMT parent representative, which is currently vacant. And I don't know if either one of these potential applicants would fill the parent criteria or be interested.
Well, we also have an opening on the Community Services Board. I believe, don't we have a resignation there? And I realize that's a completely separate application.
We received resignation today for the CSB.
Hopefully I can maybe help fill that CSB board vacancy now that I know some of the criteria, especially with Mr. LaGraff stating that they need to be receiving or have a family member receiving services. So maybe we can connect some applicants with the board. Because I do think that's important, just as we look at applicants for our CPMT, in fact, with either a child or have received services from Comprehensive Services Act. With the CPMT and our 2 applicants, Mrs. Payne's husband previously sat as a parent rep on our CPMT, so I'm not certain that she would want to fill that seat or would be eligible to fill that seat on our CPMT.
So I'd like to go ahead and put forward Eva Payne's name for this position, being that she's been a foster parent and she's a school teacher, and I think understands what's going on pretty well already. And it's nothing against you, Mr. Meade. I know you're highly qualified and you do a heck of a lot for CCLC. And but that that could be perceived as a possible conflict because they overlap. These 2 positions, these 2 responsibilities overlap slightly, not much, but slightly. So in that respect, I'd like to go ahead and put forward Eva Payne's name for this application, for this appointment.
I'll second that.
Just a question, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, Jen, what did you say about the CSB board and Mr. McGrath? I mean, that wasn't a parent opening, was it? It hasn't been.
No, it doesn't have, when I was listening to Mr. LeGrand talk about the needing a board member for the CSB board, he had stated that he kind of put it just.
37.2, 501.
Yeah, that one.
Requires certain membership criteria, and one of those is that of all of their members, that they have, I think, at least one representative who is or has received services. I think they're not meeting that now. He told his board and other boards, his obligation is satisfied when he tells you that is something they're supposed to do, so.
So maybe through our work, if we're able to connect you with an applicant in that position, I think that would be wonderful.
Some of Jen's clients may be good board members for CSB.
As long as we can get that confidentiality piece waived. Because I think the best advocate for services is someone who has received the services. And so we apply that same mentality to our parent representatives on our family assessment planning team and on our our community policy management team. I'm trying not to use acronyms, through the Comprehensive Services Act. So in thinking about that is what I was trying to relay there.
I'm clear on it, thank you.
Sorry.
I would just want to be clear that the appointment that the board makes would be effective November 6th, the day after our current member finishes her term. But we need to
Jump ahead.
yeah.
Thank
And
you.
it sounded like with that community services board opening, the recipient would be the preference, but it isn't a necessary requirement.
Right.
Yeah, and we can allow one of our other neighbors to pick that requirement up.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Motion made, second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The next item is the item we were just speaking of, the community policy management team. Just by way of quick background, we had these on the agenda last month to clean up, I think, maybe an oversight in the last year or so, or 10. And we appointed the current parent rep, Ms. Sherry Johnson, but she alerted us when she received my letter of congratulations that she's moved out of the county. So we do need a parent representative, and so if you are aware of any parent who may be interested in serving on CPMT, please bring their name forward. I have no applications at this point.
The next one, appointment to the fire water board.
Fire levy board, this is new, and Mr. Welch informed me the very beginning of this week, or maybe last week, I can't remember, that the representative from the Wakefield district has resigned from the fire levy board. As you're aware, each of the districts has a representative, and then there are some defined representatives from the board, from the Volunteer Fire and Rescue Association, from the fire chiefs. The board at an earlier meeting, we'll get to later, just referred the charter to the Public Safety Committee to review and consider whether the charter should change. I don't know if in changing that charter, the Public Safety Committee will also suggest changes to the makeup of the fire levy board. It's certainly possible. But right now, we don't have an applicant for the Wakefield position, but certainly the board and the Public Safety Committee will want to think about that as you move forward.
Is there a meeting on the calendar?
Not yet. We'll have them before the end of the year.
Old business. County Building Committee.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, we met this past month, the division meeting in the month of August, and we have a subcommittee that is working on reviewing the 18 submittals from the different architectural or engineering firms that responded to the RFP that the county put out. I guess you wouldn't have it nominated any other way unless we speak about it here in a public meeting, but Alan Comp has asked to rescind his resignation from the committee, so he is still willing to serve. And then the board appointed Mr. Sullivan, so we have 5 members right now. I don't know if the board has any idea of expanding it beyond that. 5 is a good number, it could be larger. So we met and discussed the ongoing work, and right now all the work that has been left as far as bids received or whatever, the only thing that hasn't been completed is the emergency handicap ramp out here behind the courthouse. And that is scheduled, I think, for the end of this month.
End of October, beginning of November. We actually have about a 10-day block that we managed to work through. And I spoke with the judge after the, whatever that thing was, last week. I knew he'd be here, and he entertained me for a few minutes just to talk about courthouse renovations that may be coming in the future, and very preliminary.
Roughly for the last year, it's been almost impossible to find a window of time long enough to tear that walk out and leave the courthouse without 2 means of ingress and egress. At the same time, coordinate with the weather. The weather's been very uncooperative. So, I guess, the reasons why we have to be in and out of this courthouse. That's pretty much it. Mr. Kaczynski, can I add to it?
I have just a couple of things. Thank you, Mr. Frazier. One of the things the committee wanted to get clarity on was, I think, I believe it was the former county administrator's building, the deed restriction. I think that was discussed, and I think Mr. Luke, as the deputy county attorney, was going to be asked to review the deed and see what we could and could not do with that building going forward. And then lastly, it was suggested that the committee provide some type of interim report to the board of its list of accomplishments. And I believe Mr. Curry and Mr. Jenkins and I will be working on that for our next meeting, which is scheduled for October the 17th. Which is a Wednesday.
So we have on that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and then the next one would be the tower site.
I have nothing to report on that other than I've had a little bit of email traffic with somebody concerning the possibility of doing some tests for frequency coverage for a repeater for 800 megahertz radios, but I need to get with Mr. Curry and Ms. Smith on that.
Well, besides that, I don't have anything to report.
I'll just note that I have been in communication with CWS, just trying to make sure we're on track. They're telling me their schedule at this point looks to have tenants be able to go on the tower in March. So coordinating with Harris to that end. And also pushing with our potential backhaul partners to see how that is evolving as well.
Did they know where that is yet?
Depends on whose fiber you're talking about.
Okay, number 3. Mr. Lozinski, broadband.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I believe you were handed a hard copy of the committee's interim report. Don't be alarmed by its length. A lot of this is simply includes the CIT's survey results and findings. Really, the meat of this is in the first 6 or 7 pages, which I guess are more or less the executive summary, including page 2. There's a background of the committee's goals at the outset. On pages 2 and 3, you'll find some of the progress that we made. page 3, there's a list of what the committee believes to be the county's broadband needs, which, you know, are particularly, everybody knows what those, it has heard those in detail various times. Some conclusions that are presented, and then probably most importantly on page 6, you'll see some what we call developing recommendations we'd like to make to the board to explore further. This committee is proposing to engage with current and potential providers for the purposes of identifying to the Board of Supervisors which providers may be interested in bringing better internet service into the county. Some ideas that are presented in the report include some of the usual suspects like Chantel, Comcast. Mr. Curry has had some communication with them, as he has with Chantel. And what has not been explored yet is our utility provider, the Rappahannock Electric Co-op. We're proposing that the committee try to set up some meetings with representatives of those groups. Obviously, these are public meetings, and anybody on this board would be more than welcome to attend, but we expect that many of those folks will say, well, Rappahannock's either not big enough, there's not enough, it's too expensive, etc. But we think that we need to identify who the potential providers might be. Secondly, there's an annex in the report that talks about potential funding sources that the county may wish to explore in the future based on what the provider may be looking for. These include everything from grants, for example, from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, forming public-private partnerships with providers. Mr. Curry and I participated in a webinar last week with the Department of Community Housing Development in the Commonwealth for their Virginia Telecom initiative. We need to get Comcast or somebody like that to come on board if we were to be able to take advantage of any of those funds. And Mr. Curry was able to work with Cox Communications in his previous community. And then there's also a little discussion there about municipal bonds. Again, these are simply sources and ideas. The committee also, under its recommendations, made a note that feels that the comprehensive plan should reflect the desire for enhanced broadband services in the county. I know it's already in the comp plan, and I know that's being worked on right now as part of Chapter 6. And then finally, there's a discussion that we've heard me talk before about this PPEA, this public-private facilities legislation. I call it legislation that is available. That the counties adopt. They adopt a resolution that adopts this act, this PPEA. And the CIT recommended that because if you do go out with an RFP, I don't want to kill you with acronyms here, many providers want to see that we participate in the PPEA. So that is mentioned in the report as well. So with that, again, jumping into Mr. Frazier's concerns earlier, the committee does feel that there's additional good work to be done on this and would like to continue to meet. I made a mistake earlier. I said we met on the 17th. We actually met on the 24th of September. We haven't set the next meeting yet. Kind of waiting for the pleasure of the board for consensus to continue to March. Welcome any questions, but realize that the board just received this report earlier today. So you may have follow-up questions past this meeting.
I just want to make it clear that the report is in board docs for all those in the audience who don't need to go.
I'm sorry, one thing I did forget, and I want to make the board aware of this, is Mr. Curry and I have actually scheduled a meeting with Mr. Gerhardt, Supervisor Gerhardt in Fauquier County. He is leading the broadband charge in Fauquier, and we just want to get a little bit better idea of what they're doing next door. He's talking about some new technologies that are helping some of their more rural areas, communities in Fauquier. for us to learn about that, I think would be very, very beneficial too. So we continue to do outreach as well. That's on November 1st. I guess there could be another board member there, if anyone so desires. I think it's at 1 or at 1:30. It's going to be at his offices in Warrenton.
What day is it?
November the 1st. I believe that is, let's see, first. Is that a Wednesday or a Thursday? No, it's Tuesday. He has office hours on Tuesday. So I'm pretty confident that's a Tuesday.
First is Monday.
Oh my, let me see.
November 1st is Thursday.
All right. All right, well, I'm trying to throw you all off the trail. It's Tuesday, the 30th of October. I'm busted. At 1:30 in Warrenton.
While the ramp is being replaced.
Okay.
That it?
Yes, sir. That's my point.
There's no updates to the rules. I don't think Mr. Fraser will work on anything by himself.
Yes, sir.
Board Finance Committee.
Same situation.
Far limit action like
As I noted earlier, this item was on your agenda last month with a referral to the Public Safety Committee. I didn't know what the planning of the Public Safety Committee would be and whether there would be a report out. It doesn't appear there is, so I just had it as a placeholder in case.
We'll likely meet late October, early November to conclude our quarterly meetings before the holiday season. So if you want to keep it there, placeholder, that's fine.
That brings us to update regarding telephone.
Somebody must be giving out failed phone circuits that
Are you having problems again?
I'm getting 3 or 4 calls a day. I don't seem because the phone's not working.
Interesting. Well, let me just give you a quick update, and I do want to lead off by saying things are better, but they're not. There are still issues, and some of them have been consequential. So just to make sure everybody's aware, you need, citizens and customers need to call their service issue into CenturyLink or Verizon. It's very important that you do that, to have the data logged, and that helps their metrics to determine whether capital improvements will be made, as well as to potentially aggregate complaints to a certain area, and it helps them zero in on certain capital or certain infrastructure issues that may be relating to one problem. So it is important. However, after you do that, you can reach out to the county administrator's office and let us know of your concerns. We're trying to track all of the issues and have had several in September. About 10 or 12 reported to us in September, of which all but 3 are fully resolved right now. And the telephone companies, once those items get escalated to us, a call to administration, and we reach out to either CenturyLink or Verizon, they tend to get resolved in a day or 2. Particularly if there are health issues, age issues, or other extenuating circumstances. There are a few other issues, and one is several periods where in Chester Gap, the whole area's telephones have gone out for 4 or 5 hours at a time. And CenturyLink hasn't expressed to us why that's happening, and they wanted to argue with us whether it was happening. I think we got through that. Mr. Williams got through that. And so now we understand they are trying to look into it, but as with any intermittent problem, they're hard to track down. We just hope that it doesn't happen at the wrong time, and we know that there have been 911 calls that couldn't be placed where people had to go to the fire station or whatnot to do that. Fortunately, that area has reasonable cell coverage if you have the right carrier. On the other side of that, we had a Verizon customer in Kaiser Run who came to us and provided his information, and was an elderly individual who we had great concern for, and we quickly escalated that up the chain. Well, between the time when we escalated and the repair happened, there was a 911 call that couldn't go through. And that individual had to drive his spouse to the high school where they could get a telephone call out by cell, and I think Washington, Volunteer Fire and Rescue.
Actually, he had to drive down to the school, make the call,
and go back up,
and then drive up
Then
because his wife
couldn't move.
and he could go to get back into the house.
So after
it was pouring rain.
After that happened, and so we had previously escalated that, and had some assurances that someone would be assigned to it ASAP, but it didn't happen for whatever reason. So after we learned of and we continued to ping, after we learned of that incident, we reached out to all the Verizon contacts that we had, and it was fixed the next day. So what I've tried to do with Verizon and CenturyLink is to make sure we all understand situations like that, and if there are changes that need to be made in how items are being reported through the normal path or through us, that we can make those. And Verizon said that if a customer calls the 1-800 Verizon number, if they can, and you let them know there's a medical sensitive situation, that ticket will be handled by a tech within 24 hours. So it's very important for those individuals to do that. We understand in some cases you can't call because your phone doesn't work. So we remain to have our office open as a point of escalation. If you can't call from your office, come to our office, we'll call, we'll do whatever is necessary to get that through. The other, we have a kind of an odd issue where we have somebody's phone making family 911 calls, and so that's happened 6 or 8 times, and we're engaging CenturyLink to try to get to the bottom of that, because after the dispatch receives the 10th call from the same location and you don't need service, they've since worked out a system where they'll use a cell phone as the back channel to confirm that services aren't actually needed. So the problems are still out there, but I feel like the bulk of those problems have been addressed. And it may be somewhat that not everybody's heard that county administration is available and has some pathways to escalate. So if you're out in the public and the paper is spreading the word, that is important. Call it in and then contact administration.
What was the situation on Harris Holland Road?
Well, up until this morning, it was okay, and this morning we received a report that there's back to static on at least Holt Ski Lodge. So it will be a continuing battle. What I've been trying to do, transition to somewhat, not that we're abandoning the maintenance escalation, but try to transition to understanding better what CenturyLink and Verizon are doing to aggregate the maintenance calls to inform their infrastructure rehab. And I'm not getting very far with that. CenturyLink has silos, and it's kind of one of these, and so we can keep pushing on that. And we may not be able to force infrastructure improvements, but every time there are issues, we squeak and squeak loudly, as well as the SCC. The SCC may have more power than we do. So that's my telephone report.
Mr. Curry, I've got to think that there's something that this county can do to bring these providers to the table to make some real changes. And we've been, we've been very good, we've been very diligent, we've been very tough, and you've gotten a certain measured response, but I still, and the weather's been difficult, I get that, but I still feel like with both Verizon and especially CenturyLink, I almost feel like I'm in a game of whack-a-mole with these people. And I know the State Corporation Commission is there to try to bring some additional weight, additional force to the situation, but I'm not seeing, other than them calling the providers like we're calling the providers, I'm not seeing where they're getting any more
I did have
traction than we are.
I did have some insight into that, and CenturyLink statewide found themselves on the wrong list at the SCC, and they were forced to participate in a weekly conference call with SCC to prove progress on their issue statewide. They were just released from that last week. So I believe there are a lot of gears turning in the background with the SCC that we're not fully aware of. And that's why I say we need to keep the pressure up, us on the providers, but also us to the SCC, so they have a clear view of what's happening in the field and can advocate on our behalf when needed.
Because this is just not a nice to have and a kind of a luxury. I know some people are, concerned, as they should be, that they paid these providers hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for service that they never got. But now we're starting to get instances of life and death. I mean, I'm familiar with, a little more familiar with the Kaiser Run incident. I mean, that was a critical condition situation in which I don't think we know whether or not that individual involved is back from the hospital or frankly survived that incident.
And I understand that they are resting comfortably in the hospital at this point.
Thank you. But Mr. Goff, is there anything that the county can do with respect to these providers, working with the State Corporation Commission, where we might have to start talking about legal remedies, or is that something not available to the county? And maybe what I'm asking is if you could do a little research on that. Because I personally, I don't know how the board members feel. I don't want to task you without some kind of consensus of other board members, but this has been a 3 to 4 month problem. The county administrator's been working on it diligently. Neighbors continue, constituents continue to have problems, and it's now becoming a public safety matter. I mean, I almost think we've got to go nuclear here pretty soon, for lack of a better way of putting it. But I don't know if we have the capability to do that. These companies are so sheltered, they're so protected in the federal laws that, since there's very little we can do. Individuals can, but what can we do as a board for all these people in the county who continue to suffer through this problem?
At first, just approaching it raw here, I probably, my inclination is to say there's probably not a lot, but I certainly am willing to look at it. Like I said, the regulatory agencies are kind of beyond the reach of local boards. And that's where I think that the pressure now, that doesn't mean to say that we can't be the voice of these particular constituents. But I don't know that we're going to be able to, there may be federal preemption, is what I'm saying. That once there's federal preemption, we can't go walking into court with a petition asking for a state judge to make such a decision. And we may not have standing in a federal court because of the statutory scheme under which these utilities operate.
I mean, is there any remedy we can seek in conjunction with the powers that the State Corporation Commission may have over these groups, or?
Yeah, I think to the extent that pressure can be applied through them, it would more likely be limited to requests for action and complaints. And I would hope to think that a complaint that was signed, the Board of Supervisors of Rappahannock County is going to carry some weight.
I wonder if the Federal Communications Corporation would be able to be any remedy to us. I know when I worked in building in WorldCom, they sort of set the standards for what we were allowed and not allowed to build. So I'm not sure that might be a resource.
I would think that some agency like that would have an office of the ombudsman that we could probably contact for guidance.
Well, I can say that in the past, when we've reached out to our state delegation and they've pushed on SCC, that seemed to make a difference. And SCC has engaged us, but there's a curtain that we don't see behind.
So did you want, Mr. Lozinski, did you want me to do something directly about this?
Well, again, I'm going to do, I'll defer to the pleasure of the board, but yes, personally, I would think you to see whether or not there's anything with the State Corporation Commission that we're not exploring right now. Mr. Curry, I don't want to cross, sometimes
We kick this out off with a letter to the SEC and our legislators.
Yeah.
And that has had an impact, and I think, at least in CenturyLink's perspective, several other localities were experiencing the same thing, and they also took similar actions, which is why there were improvements. But our concern is that aged infrastructure will continue to fail, and there will continue to be a maintenance requirement. So at what point does somebody link maintenance to infrastructure upgrade, and what role do we have in that, or can we have in that? Are we just destined to yell very loudly when maintenance issues happen? And it may be that that's our output, and we just need to do that as the most efficient way we can.
Well, I think you need to capture it in terms of the public safety issue. It's absolutely a public safety matter that these lines are reliable when they work, regardless of, rain, snow, sleet, or whatever. So I don't know, what other board members feel similarly? Would they like Mr. Goff to explore remedies with the SEC? Could be a short conversation, but I think we owe it to our people.
But I think I think it's appropriate, because first thing I feel like that I have enforcement problems when I answer definitively, I don't know. At least we'll know if there's something we can do, we're going to try. If there's nothing we can do, then we know that.
Well, it did come to this board. We had a discussion with the Public Safety Committee, so I think we've been having that approach to it all along, but I think certainly continuing it in that vein is appropriate, because not all of the problems have been resolved, and there's been a recent incident where it was indeed a safety issue, so I think it's appropriate to continue and explore what our options may be.
Maybe Mr. Goff will have something for the next time the Public Safety Committee meets.
When is that?
It will be probably the first week in November.
So maybe I should just give you an opinion in the November board meeting here
That would be good.
as to what, if any litigation options. I mean, are you looking for ways to force somebody at the SEC to do something? That's essentially what I'm getting here.
Not under the SEC, I guess, but the utility companies themselves, if there's anything that we can do. But the only option we have is to keep pressure on our state officials. If that's it, then that's it.
Okay.
So we'll engage the SEC as well to have them help us understand whether we.
What other remedies do we have? And this may involve, legal remedies.
Yep, I got you.
Okay.
New business?
This brings us to an annual authorization to enter an agreement with the health department for their local services. This was on the board agenda the same month last year. This is for FY19 services. We're a quarter of the way through the year, and they seem to be right on the ball this year, only being 3 months behind. But I did have Mr. Goff look through this agreement, and there was one item in the agreement that was not clear with respect to funding, and doesn't show up in this version attached. They struck through that line. The line that shows under paragraph 1, the budget that the board passed was for $114,943, so that is correct. local matching funds, and then it says $0, 100% local funds, for a total of $114,000, and just how it's worded is confusing. Whereas it could say $114,000 of local matching funds and $50 of 100% local funds, but it's confusing the way it's written, and so we just struck through the $0, 100% local funds to make it clear that the contribution is only $114,943. So what I'm asking for is authorization from the board to allow me to execute that agreement on the board's behalf through a motion.
46 cents or whatever it was that was left over from the year before.
Yeah, and so the 46 cents left over from the year before, it's just easier to let them use it than try to clean it up. I guess apparently they do a very good job of using every last dollar.
Yeah,
it looks like. The document details all the services that they provide for the county and our citizens.
So this is a motion that would authorize you to sign this agreement?
Yeah, you could authorize the chair or anybody you want, actually, but last year you authorized the county administrator to execute.
Well, I'll make that motion.
Well, second.
Motion made and second. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is regarding the annual VACO conference scheduled for November. Earlier in the year, there was a discussion of myself and a board member going, and Mr. Parrish was that member, generally discussed, no action was taken. Mr. Parrish has indicated he's unable to attend. I have registered to take advantage of the early bird price. And so if a board member is interested in going, we need to get you registered. If you're not, we'll go ahead and take a credit on the room reservation that we already secured several months ago when we had to do that. In addition, there are, the VACO board meeting occurs during this conference, and the board is asked to identify your voting delegate. That delegate can be a board member as identified, or a non-elected official, which could be myself, or an elected official from another locality if you wanted them to carry your proxy vote with them, or nobody if you didn't want to cast your vote at the annual meeting. So this item, if a board member is interested in going to VACO, I need to know so I can make the registration. And if the board would like to designate or delegate somebody to cast your vote in the business meeting, I need to know that so I can fill out that form which is attached to the agenda.
I'm fine with letting you do that. I don't know what you vote on, but
It's the biggest thing is the legislative agenda for VACO.
so do you want that in form of a motion? That we nominate you to, or allocate you to vote for us, VACO?
Yeah, if that's what you want to do.
I'd like to do that. I'd like to nominate our county administrator to vote in our seat at the VACO conference.
I'm fine with that, I'll second that.
Motion made and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carried.
How would you like to handle the, whether or if a board member will attend the VACO conference? There is a bit of time left before registration closes.
I'll let you know. Oh,
This is our last meeting though before you have to turn it in.
I believe so. And the price, it just ratchets up in price as we get closer. I do recall that the hotel room, which was rather expensive, I think we had up to a week before to cancel that. And we had to pay for the first night. We will get that back.
As much as I might like to, I know that I will be unable to attend.
So I'll take it this as you'll call me.
Yes, sir.
Almost as bad as reaching for the last piece of chicken.
I'll try to quickly go through this by county administrator update, which is the next item. We covered some of these items. The radio system, have engaged SBA, the owner of the tower behind Amosville, and as well as the president from Amosville Volunteer Fire and Rescue, and do have a copy of their agreement that shows that they are entitled to a spot on that tower for free. So I'm working with SBA to try to make that free for us as well, or structure deals as necessary to make sure there's no cost there. Told you that the Sperryville Tower is supposed to be available in March, and then I'm working with several vendors on backhaul. I have inquired with Harris about cost for an 800 megahertz site here, and hadn't heard back, and I reached out to them again today and told them I was waiting. Kevin and I are actually meeting with them tomorrow morning, which we just scheduled today to go over everything. The courthouse ramp project, as you're aware, will be at the end of October, beginning of November, finally. And with that, I spoke with Judge Parker about long-term thoughts of renovations to this building or maintenance upgrades to this building. We don't know what it might be. And just a very early warning that we want to make some improvements. And it's not easy. Now the computerized system for the Supreme Court is all tied in. You can't just go somewhere else. So it's this courthouse or another courthouse or somewhere that's tethered to this courthouse, or very careful scheduling where court cases can be moved to Warrenton, to their courthouse, and it'd be just like being here. The judge wasn't too interested in doing that for jury trials where you have a lot of citizens involved. So it'll take some work to schedule whatever it is that we decide we need to do to this building into periods of time that we can cause it to be available. And the judge said that he would work with us the best we could to make that happen. Mr. Frazier already mentioned the RFP and where we are on that. The comprehensive plan is working its way into the Planning Commission. They have a work session scheduled for this Wednesday, 3rd. And I've been doing some work on that myself. Michelle inserted the data from the Regional Commission, and I'm going behind her on some of that information. I've asked Michelle to have the Planning Commission focus on Chapter 6 and greater at their meeting coming up, the real meat and output of the plan as we continue to work on that background, updated background information. Just a quick note, the court already knows that the county code is up to date now online at our online code publisher. That hasn't been up to date in the past, and so it's good that if you want to see what the current code is, including the most recent ordinance the board approved, it's online. Williams' special exception continues to be of great interest to the public, as Ms. Renzi handed you a letter today about that subject. Ms. Summers did inspect the site, and she did send a notice of violation to Mr. Williams, particularly in regard to one of the conditions of the permit, which is the proximity of the wood and wood products to the road. Mr. Williams has expressed that he will resolve that compliance matter, so we'll be checking in with him on that. We'll be meeting with Ms. Summers and Mr. Goff in the near future to work through the entire permit, the complaints to date, to make sure that we're on top of everything and that we're giving due diligence to the complaints that have been received and making sure we understand the best path forward. Similar to that is the Benvenue Road and continued interest from residents along Benvenue Road to have that road designated as no through truck. I've pressed back to VDOT on that matter, and as well as regarding the affirmative signage. And received Friday, I believe I passed the word to the board that VDOT will support affirmative signage. They're not sure what it would be to highlight that a truck route or appropriate truck route is forward is to 522. And they also confirmed to me that if the board wants to work through a no-through truck restriction, we would follow the same exact process as we did for Water Street and Sons Lane. And that would involve the Board of Supervisors advertising and scheduling a public hearing. And then working through that process, passing a resolution, and sending off to VDOT, telling VDOT that you are asking them to perform a study. And the original feedback we received from VDOT was that we would have to conduct and pay for that study, and they backtracked on that. So I will need to know from the board at some point in time if we want that public hearing to occur for a no-through truck on Benvenue Road. And then we'll work the calendar to make sure we have the advertisements in the paper as necessary to work through that process. That's my report.
What about reduction of speed limit?
The speed study is still underway.
Okay.
Has there been any update on when they might install that sign on Water Street? You know, there was an incident last week with another truck on Water
Great
Street.
photo in the paper.
Yes.
They have their statutory period that they must advertise, and so I suspect as soon as we work through that, particularly with the incident, with the sign up saying this street is subject to,
Right.
so, no, I have not heard, but they have to check the boxes. That same process would have to go through. You saw that VDOT had to place notices in our local paper, and they had to post a sign at either side, and basically a notice of willingness to hold a public hearing. We would have to do that for any through truck restriction.
Thank you.
Sir, the next item are just two items of information that I received in my office. First, regarding the Virginia Cooperative Gypsy Moth Suppression Program. I've not been here, I don't know what involvement the community's had in that. But there is information attached if the board member thinks that gypsy moths are particularly a bad problem here. Let me know, and we can chase down this program. There is low cost.
It is a big forestry is a big industry here.
Are gypsy moths and
Gypsy moth, they came through about 10 years ago, I think, and did a lot of damage. Killed a lot of trees, a lot of old growth trees, and it sounds like they're worried about coming back. So, I don't know what the cost would be, what the cost, and I don't know
Well, why don't I dig
it
into
is something, it is something to worry about.
If I can remember correctly, and please chime in if I am wrong, but I believe that Park would not spray, so we basically had this reservoir up there on the hill that they didn't do anything about, and anything that we did here was not of much use. And it really did, it was horrendous. It stripped a lot of the old growth trees and damaged them to the point of ruin.
I'll do a little due diligence to try to understand what the costs may or may not be, and how, when you have certain programs like this, you will hear from all sectors of your public, those that think spraying is critically needed and those who think that spraying is a terrible idea because it may affect many other things. So it's not an easy decision, we just want to get rid of gypsy moths. It's never that easy.
So is this something we should reach out to the Agriculture and Forest District's Advisory Committee about? Talking about them
Yeah,
earlier.
they don't have anything to do with that.
I'll do some background
That's
review.
why it's just a planning tool. The extension agent.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people, including us, spray on our own, but it would be nice to have some guidance for those that wanting to do that. And to find out how bad the problem is.
Right. And the next item is just a letter from Commerce and Trade Secretary Ball. It was an output from the meeting I went to, the Inland Port, which was an economic development meeting, and I shared our local vision of economic development, a little bit different than what happens up there on 522 near the Inland Port. But it was just his reach back saying thank you for being involved. Contacts were good, and as we continue to look for highest and best use for things like the Aladdin plant, then these contacts are good to have.
Thank you for attending.
Next in your packet are your building permit report, your zoning administrator report, and your VDOT monthly report. No action to take on those items, but they're there for your public input. That brings us to item 10. I haven't received clear direction as to what the board wanted to do with respect to a closed session on performance evaluation, so I did place a closed session for performance evaluations on the agenda if the board wanted to enter, and I did prepare a motion to do that if the board is willing to do that.
I think we're behind time if we can do that. It's a part of the contract that is agreeing to that.
Yeah, I think you're going to do it down in the gym, but I didn't remind anybody of that till I think.
Is that the time period on discussion is 1 January to 30 June?
I think the idea was in the agreement, it was an annual review, and it was just said the first one would be in aligning with the fiscal year. But obviously had been a year.
So through September 30th.
Right. And the ultimate performance review is, vote that I'm not here anymore, so that hasn't happened. I appreciate that. So I didn't know what the board wanted to do. In the packet, I included the forms that two members helped pull together. They are there. And then there's also this motion to conduct a closed meeting. If the board wanted to do that today. Maybe you want to go into closed meeting and talk about your process. You can do that in open meeting. So if you want to get on the same page of how you want to move forward, I just know that as the reviewee, I'd rather not drive the train.
Right, I think we can do this, and I would rather we go into closed session. Or next week, we got
You got that on the screen?
all that will be good for these. I move that the Rappahannock County Board of Supervisors conduct a closed meeting in accordance with 2.2-3711A of the Code of Virginia for the purpose of 1, discussion and consideration of performances specifically imposed in the public body. That's 2.2-3711A1. And the subject matter of the closed meeting will be 1, performance evaluation of the county administrator for section 15 of the employment agreement, performance evaluation of the county attorney.
A second.
Motion made, second, roll call vote. Mr. Frazier. Mr. Lozinski.
Aye.
Ms. Smith. Mr. Parrish.
Aye.
And I also. First item is order and open meeting.
I move we come out of closed session, Mr. Chairman.
It doesn't require a motion, but you do need to certify.
The certification reads, do each of you certify that to the best of your knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meetings requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered by the Board of Supervisors in the closed meeting.
Mr. Frazier.
Aye.
Mr. Lozinski.
Aye.
Ms. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Parrish.
Aye.
And I also. No public hearing scheduled. Presentation. Mr. Fraser.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'd like to make this presentation briefly, read it. Hopefully everyone will suffer through my reading of this presentation. It's a resolution of appreciation from this board to Mr. Raymond Brown, who served on the Planning Commission for Jackson District for 20 years. And I think, so that I can say it loud enough, I'll read it sitting down and then I'll present it to Mr. Brown. So, whereas Raymond Brown has served on the Rappahannock County Planning Commission as a representative for the Jackson District for over 20 years, and whereas Raymond Brown's dedication to his responsibilities, his congeniality, his concern for the community, and his dedication to sound land use planning in Rappahannock has been made manifest through all his years as a member, and whereas Raymond Brown has served the citizens of Rappahannock County with honor, integrity, and sincerity, now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors for Rappahannock County does hereby express its sincere appreciation and thank Raymond Brown for his long and distinguished service to the Planning Commission and to the county. Be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be spread across the minutes of the Board of Supervisors of Rappahannock County and that a presentation copy be provided to Mr. Brown. And I would like to present this to Mr. Raymond Brown. Mr. Brown. Maybe say something too. This presentation to you, sir.
Okay.
Appreciate your hard work that you did on behalf of the county.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is public comment. This is where anyone who wants to speak has the opportunity to do so. So please raise your hand to be recognized, and when recognized, state your name, the district that you're from, and I'll open the public comment now. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Al Regner. I'm in the Hampton District, and I'm appearing this evening on behalf of the United Citizens of Rappahannock, a new organization that was formed a couple of months ago. You may have seen reference to it in the Rap News. We had an editorial a couple of weeks ago about it. Steve Brooks is my co-chairman. We've been working together, and so that you know, I'm a conservative Republican, and Steve is a liberal Democrat. We get along very well on a lot of things. We disagree on a lot of things, but we also agree on some things. I know that you have a proposal before you this evening to adopt, ultimately, a code of conduct or code of ethics for the county. UCOR, at its last board meeting, adopted as its principal policy for the next couple of months, urging the county to adopt such a document that would spell out, hopefully, as it's finally adopted, for all the appointed members of Rappahannock County, all the board members, elected members, and employees, a general code of how to conduct themselves in public, the ethical things that they should do, and so on. Many counties have adopted these. I don't need to tell you that the decisions that you make and the other members of the county make every day affect all of us as citizens, and we think that if we had a consistent policy, basically, of conduct and ethics, of spelling out the things that should be done, the way that you should behave, you should do things, you should vote, and so on, to support the county and the residents of the county, and by the same token, how people in the public should react to you. And we go a long way, ultimately, to solving some of the discord that we have in Rappahannock County. What we would like to do is to volunteer to help Mr. Goff draft such a document and present it to you at the next board meeting. Stephen and I are both attorneys. We both practiced in a lot of different forums over the years, over many years, nationally, locally, in Congress and other places, and I think we could probably do a good job of finding representative codes that have been adopted in other counties, working with them and presenting it to you and urging you to adopt it. And I should say that the Youth Corps organization is gaining members quickly. We have something short of 100 members at the present time. You may have seen emails and other things. We're recruiting people now, so that I can assure you that as we go forward, there will be people in each one of your districts, and we're going to keep after you until this gets done. So you can, as I say, rest assured that there will be some lobbying on this from a lot of people, and we think that, again, it would do a lot of good for the county. Stephen, you want to add anything to that?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Yeah.
My name is John, I'm Wakefield District. I wish to speak to the proposed resolution for the court-appointed BZA member Attorney Conway. It is imperative to recognize that the County Board of Supervisors has no business entertaining any allegations made through personal exchanges when someone is interacting not as a public representative. The fact that someone chooses to make public what came to them in a direct personal communication, no matter how often or in what format it is then publicized, does not in any way empower you, the local public government business board, supposedly conducting critical and way behind the necessary execution of public business, to interject yourself or to waste my tax dollars or your limited time on some obviously personal vendetta. Supervisor Welch, you as chairman here had an obligation to cut this off when it started last month in the public comment section of the early meeting. It was then that it should have been made clear to those individuals who are concerned with personal threats, as alleged by Mrs. Lazinski. The police is where this goes, not the county board. Instead, you let a vituperative litany of allegations be spewed here, even permitting non-county people to waste your and my time on something which has no place here at all. The allegations trumpeted by your wife, Supervisor Lazinski, they were ludicrous and purely a figment of her apparently lurid, self-centered, overactive imagination. As already stated, this property belongs with the police and the legal system and taken to court for adjudication if there is substance. You know that. Your resolution here incorporates a bunch of allegations and some communications which purport to be offensive in some way. None of the material reference is illegal in any nature. None of it warrants your involvement at any official level. Where do you get off judging calling someone particularly to dishonor the mayor of Washington a pimp? Quite frankly, he earned the label fair and square. He broke the law when he colluded behind the scenes to successfully engineer the giveaway of a piece of our historic county seat, Washington, Virginia, where he gave a previously public roadway dating from the creation of the village before it was even a town, handed to the ersatz mayor without payment and against the very comp plan of the town itself. The fact that an attempt to have him prosecuted was short-circuited because the complainant failed to establish legal standing in no way changed the fact that his dishonor acted outside the law, and the emails between him and the owner of more than 30% of the town, all exchanged before the public town meetings, prove it without a doubt. Frankly, the fact that you have wasted time on any of this is an insult greater than any made in your supportive crack for this resolution. If you feel the need to disassociate yourselves from what others have said, it is your prerogative. However, the resolution you have drafted is inappropriate. There is no need for whereases or any of the there is no need for whereas statements or any of the rest of what has been written. The only basis for a resolution is exactly that. You wish to assure the community that no member speaks in private personal communications for the board, and any statements made publicly that purport to represent the board are unauthorized. None of the cited statements purported to represent a public official position or even sentiment. The problem here is that some of you all have animosity towards Mr. Connick because as a board, you've been called out and shown to be less than diligent and conscientious in the prosecution of your duties. That's even habitually so apparently from the documentation on record. The current and past actions filed in court cases where Mr. Connick is the attorney of record, cases which place you as defendants, both collectively and as individuals, make this resolution totally inappropriate, no matter what. The resolution isn't proper business for this board. And you, by even proposing it, you're stepping into something which will come back to haunt you and the taxpayers. Stop it right now. Do not support this resolution.
Stop yourself right now.
Thank you.
Arrogance has no place here.
Quiet, please.
Arrogance personified.
Anyone else care to speak?
I have no prepared remarks. I am Damaris Miller, Hampton District. Members of the board, I am very concerned about issues that affect all the citizens of this county. I am concerned about fire and rescue. I look into the future and I see enormous problems for this county in fire and rescue because we have such an aging population. As it is, the people who do the volunteer work are working very hard, long hours. They not only do the work to protect us, but they are also raising money to buy the equipment and to take care of their firehouses. I appreciate what they're doing. I would like this board to pay more attention to that kind of thing in this county. I would like this board to pay closer attention to what kind of personnel matters we have in this county, what kind of processes we use in human resources to be sure that all of our county employees have been appropriately investigated before they are given jobs. I want to be sure that this county is paying close attention to the budget because how we spend our money is critical to what kind of taxes we're going to have to pay. We are caring about those kinds of things. It is true that I'm a member of an organization that is interested in open government. We don't advocate any issues, and I don't speak for that organization. All that organization does, Rappahannock Citizens for Community Empowerment, all they do is insist on open government, help educate the public, videotape when the newspaper is unable to do, and provide information about county meetings and county activities. We do not advocate anything. I'm only a member, not an officer. I don't speak for them. But I speak for myself personally. With all of the issues that this county has to be concerned about, I wish you would turn your attention to the taking care of the county buildings, the county properties, and the citizens of this county, and not waste your time with resolutions that have no business in this body. Thank you.
Anyone else care to speak? Yes, sorry.
My name is Terry Dixon. I live in the Stonewall Hawthorne District. I'd like to speak on the issue of the public reprimand from Mr. Connick. So the problem apparently is with behavior. Now I personally don't know exactly what happened, but I am not condoning using foul language or anything of the sort. But there is a First Amendment still in this country. So you guys and ladies have to handle this issue for a representative of the county, because Mr. Connick is a representative of the county on the BZA. He represents county business to the public. So the question is, how do you handle this situation? And apparently there's no policy or procedure in place, which I guess is next on the agenda. So with no policy or procedure in place, you're going to publicly censure or reprimand an individual. I think that is not the best course of action. And as you are all painfully aware, Mr. Connick is currently representing clients in at least 3 lawsuits against several of you, some more than one. So how can you vote for a public reprimand if you have personal business with the person you're against? It reeks of retaliation. And I think anybody, I know you're all fully involved with this situation, but I think anybody outside, any public citizen looks at it, and they would say it reeks of retaliation. I'd recommend a simple procedure. I hope your code of conduct handles it, just like you do in the business world thousands of times a day. You meet with a person in private. If that doesn't work, you have written warning. You follow steps, not a written retaliation. Thank you.
Anyone else care to speak? Yes. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go first.
Good evening, Tom Woolman. Unlike others who spoke last month, I actually live here. I live in the Hampton District. Once again, you have somehow managed to lower the bar for pettiness and incompetent management practices in this county. This time by allowing your sessions to devolve into a kangaroo court and attack the character and reputation of one of our most prominent citizens. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines a kangaroo court as a mock court in which the principles of law and justice are disregarded and perverted, or also a court characterized by irresponsible, unauthorized, or irregular status of procedures. This is exactly what's happened today in this board session. This entire affair is nothing but an obvious attempt at settling personal scores and private vendettas using the excuse of a belatedly creating a personnel management policy. Ironically, this board has refused to implement such a personnel management policy for years, despite being told by many of us that it's desperately needed. I believe at least 3 of the supervisors here need to personally recuse themselves due to impending multiple conflicts of interest before the courts that Mr. Connick is representing us in. All the while, our county costs are continuing to skyrocket in capital assets like the courthouse continues to deteriorate, which almost burned down 18 months ago and hasn't been addressed yet, and fire and rescue have impending major budgetary issues. Lastly, this kangaroo court hasn't proven any of these statements that were supposedly vetted by the board. None of the statements were taken in context. None of the previous statements were analyzed. None of the history of the social media pettiness that brought the response into play was analyzed. And lastly, the accused, and that's exactly what he is, has not been given a chance to represent himself and respond to any of this. Thank you.
I was here earlier today. My name is John Capiello. I'm from John Blazinski's district. And I'm going to reiterate what I said earlier, but there's a new audience. The code of conduct comes into play. As I heard this gentleman just speak about the fact that there was no proof of bad conduct on behalf of a supervisor. I have in my hand all the emails that I received through the Freedom of Information Act last week with the slanderous names by Mr. Frazier against my wife, referring to her as Mrs. Crapioli, bullying the zoning administrator into changing her determination on my property. I read out loud earlier today the statements that he made against Mr. Goff here about how he wasn't going to let him have his way. We're going to teach him a lesson and put him in his place. I don't think that that's actually correct for a supervisor. So I'm just reiterating this again. And this time,
Anybody else care to speak? Yes.
My name is Doc Nash in the Hampton District. There's no one in this room that I've known longer than Al Regnery, and no one I love more than Audrey. But in Rappahannock County, my rights don't end where someone else's feelings begin. I have had conflicts with David Connick since I got here. Not once did I run to any of you. The First Amendment protects offensive language, all language, not just what you agree with. It's inappropriate for this board of supervisors to even deal with this. I'm sorry it's even up here. I have nothing more to say. Thank you.
Anyone else care to speak? Yes.
Walt Long here in Hampton District. As I was looking at tonight's agenda, one of the thoughts that came to mind is something I've said before, that history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And one of the ways it rhymes is, in this state and throughout the South, there was a code of conduct. And it was during the Jim Crow era that we had a very strong code of conduct. And if a black man looked the wrong way, talked to the wrong person, went to the wrong place, said the wrong thing, that code of conduct came down like a hammer or worse upon that person. That black man would be intimidated, he'd be chastised, he'd be beaten or shot or worse. Now, as I said, history doesn't repeat it, it rhymes. And if you're talking about a code of conduct that is imposing your values, no matter how innocent it might sound, but it's sounding like it's not as innocent as it might be, then we're approaching that. Especially since I think it's really directed at two people, David Connick and Ron Fraser. Neither of them deserve that kind of attention. It showed this resolution is a form of bullying, and 3 members of this board have done things which any normal person would say was bullying. It's not enough to just say, I don't like what's going on, but they need to, they're stepping in like, boss hog, we're going to punish you. We're going to show you, you're going to put you in your place. We're going to make sure that you don't do what we don't want you to do. This is terrible that you're even considering this.
Thank you. My name is Caroline Mensley. I live in the Hampton District. I just want to refer to the issue of codes of conduct that people have been talking about. Somebody earlier said they believe in open government. I don't think there's any question in 2018 that codes of conduct for public officials are seen as best practice in good governance. We're not talking about codes of conduct for citizens. We're talking about codes of conduct for those who hold public office. It's a norm that there are codes of conduct about corruption. It's a norm that there are codes of conduct about conflicts of interest. It is also increasingly, and look at all the counties that surround us, the norm to have codes of conduct about conduct unbecoming, about those who bring the public office into disrepute. This is not some history rhyming again. This is best good governance in 2018. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Yes.
I hadn't planned to do this, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, but I've been very much concerned about our county. I've been very much proud about our county and all our county officials. And I think that's just not much respect in this room tonight. I said I've been much in prayer about all the officials, but I think I must be much in prayer about all the people here. I'm very disturbed. I just don't understand where we've come to. We don't like what a lot of people do. I don't like what David Connick said, what he's done, but I will have to say that he's been, since my husband passed away, I couldn't tell you how many times he has called me to see if I needed anything or see if he could do anything for me. And he's been very kind to me. And I don't defend any bad language. I don't defend anything that's going on in this room tonight and went on today. I don't want to stand where we've come to. And I think we all need to pray. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else like to speak? Yes.
Page 20, Jackson District. Board members. Good evening and thank you for the opportunity to address you. Let me be clear that I do not condone foul language or harassment of any representative of government. I strongly support ethics and a standard of conduct for all government employees and representatives. Those are the elements of an employee handbook that I called for in January of 2017. I commend the county for finally getting started some 21 months later, but I am disappointed that it has been put forward, that what has been put forward is just an old draft by Ms. Kaiser and examples of other counties. I expected more after a board created a human resources position in October of 2017 at a cost of $81,000. And Mrs. Garden raised many of the same issues in her exit report of January 2018. I do not support the resolution regarding Mr. Connick as presented. It singles out Mr. Connick. Consequently, it does nothing but create a potential legal liability. Most everyone that follows this public body knows that Mr. Lazinski and others hold a grudge against Mr. Connick for the FOIA and COIA lawsuits. This action could easily be interpreted as a retaliation action subject to COIA statute 2.2 3103 paragraph 10. Furthermore, I believe the board may have violated labor laws in the way this issue was handled. First, you conducted your investigation in public. Second, you did not provide Mr. Connick with the opportunity to respond to the charges. Just a few hours ago, you appropriately held a closed session to discuss the performance of Mr. Curry and Mr. Goff. Can you explain the difference in how you handled these personnel matters? To further point out the hypocrisy at play, let me list just some of the inappropriate behaviors by government officials that I believe should also be condemned by the board. Mr. Parrish, you relieved yourself in my yard with my wife in the house. Mr. Lazinski, referring to me as a troll in the Rap News comment piece. All right? Mr. Chairman, you should hold your board members to the same standards of conduct you espouse for employees. Mr. Welch, as chairman, you are responsible for how this board operates. You have allowed Mr. Lazinski, with Mr. Parrish's help, to turn this public body into a kangaroo court. A kangaroo court that ignores recognized standards of law and justice. This is nothing more than an opportunity for them to further their feud with Mr. Connick through a clearly retaliatory action. Mr. Welch, it is your job to control the gallery, which you repeatedly have not done. On October 2nd, 2017, you allowed Ms. Regnery to tell the opponents of the bike trail to go to, and we all remember what she said. At last month's board meeting on September 5th, you allowed the gallery to interrupt and question board members during board discussions. Also at last month's board meeting, on September 5th, you allowed commenters speaking in favor of the bike trail to insult the intelligence of those that oppose the bike trail. Mr. Chairman, you have allowed the inappropriate behavior in this public body. You owe all citizens of Rappahannock County a public apology. Thank you for your time.
Okay, gentlemen, will bear with me 1 second. I would like to add a comment to this. You're standing there insulting me for doing the same thing that you've been doing. Standing there criticizing everybody in here. I've always let anybody that come to these meetings speak, and they have liberty to speak. I don't see why there's an argument about that.
Because at last month's meeting, during board discussion,
We're not having
no, you allowed all these people to move up here and question Christine, question Juan, and yell and scream. That's what you did. When Alex Sharp had that problem with the sign, he said, you all shut up or he's going to empty the gallery. That's what you didn't do.
They still have the opportunity to speak. All right. Anybody else care to speak? If you come to the meeting, you have the opportunity. Anyone else care to speak? Declare public comment closed. Next item. Subject discussion and considerations of items. Any referral to the planning commission.
This is a carry-on item from the last couple meetings where we discussed several items that the board referred to the planning commission for action as an update, mostly regarding signage and then a later update regarding the resolution that was passed last time at the board regarding tourist homes for the B&Bs and reporting. So regarding signage, there's discussion of the board and an interest by board members to explore an ordinance amendment that would potentially allow murals to exist in a way that would be permitted or be explicitly excluded from permitting. Mr. Goff has done some research, and we've talked about this together with Ms. Summers. And there appear to be two prominent ways localities are handling this situation in the state. I've summarized those here in the board packet. Norfolk, City of Norfolk, has worked through this problem in their community, having been sued over signage, and changed their ordinance in a way that they believe was in line with the Town of Gilbert Supreme Court case, and that change, that definition, satisfied the test that the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the same Court of Appeals that we would be subject to. So there's something to be said of following their path forward. And what they did, as shown in the packet, is to have a definition for a sign, and then for the many murals they have in their community, they don't require a permit at all because they don't meet the definition of sign. And I'll just go ahead and read what they are using. Any object, device, display, or structure, or part thereof, visible from a public place, a public right-of-way, any parking area, or right-of-way open to use by the general public, or any navigable body of water, which is designed and used to attract attention to an institution, organization, business, product, service, event, or location by any means involving words, letters, figures, design, symbols, fixtures, logos, colors, illumination, or projected images. So that is their definition, and their explanation of how they handle murals. If it doesn't fall into that category, which prominently would be used to attract attention to an institution, organization, business, product, service, event, or location, then it's not a sign and therefore not permitted under a sign. It's simply just painting the side of your building multiple colors. One of the problems with that, as I see, and it obviously successful, is that the rest of our zoning ordinance is pretty clear in that uses are identified and provided for as being permitted. And if they're not provided for, then you can't do it. So having a sign ordinance or definition that is turned a little bit differently than that may be confusing in the context of the rest of your ordinance. With this said, the local government attorneys from Virginia have developed a model sign ordinance. And in their sign ordinance, they've defined sign as well as public art. And in doing so, they've expressly identified that sign does not mean public art. So I'll read one of those definitions, two for sign. They're very similar. Sign means any device, writing, letter, work, or numeral, pictorial presentation, illustration or decoration, emblem, device, symbol, or trademark, flag, banner, or pin, or any other device, figure, or character, visible to and designed to communicate information to persons in a public area. However, the term sign does not include public art, holiday displays, or architectural features, except those that identify products or services or advertise business use. The term sign also does not include the display of merchandise for sale on the side of the display. The second definition is similar. The critical point there is that it does not include public art, where public art is defined as public art means items expressing creative skill or imagination in a visual form, such as painting or sculpture, which are intended to beautify or provide aesthetic influences to public areas or areas which are visible from the public realm. These are two ways that have proven to be successful to deliver a sign ordinance that allows the creative artistic signage or murals or whatever you want to call them, painted walls. And in each of these cases, as with the rest of your zoning ordinance, your zoning administrator is responsible for interpreting applications that come in or painted walls that exist in the environment should a complaint come in. And it is subjective. It is very difficult to have a precisely objective ordinance. We have one now, and it's very rigid. It does not allow the type of painted side of the building. So in that case, if a citizen who's seeking a permit is not satisfied with the zoning administrator's interpretation, they have an avenue to appeal that to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And if they're not satisfied with the Board of Zoning Appeals, they can appeal to the circuit court and on up through the court system. Alternatively, if you have a complainant come in and believes that the ordinance has been interpreted incorrectly, they have that same opportunity to work this through the court system. So there's no foolproof way to do this, as there isn't for many zoning matters. But I think the Planning Commission could benefit from knowing if the board has an inclination, if you want to permit mural type painted walls, they would benefit from knowing the board's inclination as to which direction you may want to go and have them research and do the detail work to develop an ordinance for public hearing at their level and ultimately public hearing at your level. Lastly, let me just say that the Reed versus Town of Gilbert Supreme Court case is all-encompassing, and this is not the topic of signs versus murals is not the only area in our ordinance that it comes in contact with. And there are many portions of our ordinance that could stand to be updated relative to signs to be compliant with the Gilbert case. And it's always dangerous when we try to pick one area of the sign of an ordinance, such as the sign ordinance, and fix that. And it's possible, and we do it all the time in local government. But we really do need to be looking at the rest, which is a significant undertaking. Now, the LGA has a model ordinance for signs, and that would be a starting point. But still, you need to make it appropriate for Rappahannock, because that document is potentially appropriate for any locality, and we know we're not any locality. So with that, I'll try to be quiet unless Mr. Goff has anything to add.
As you all know, this came to the board through the painting of the Welcome to Sperryville, call it painting for purposes of discussion in my district. And the gentleman who painted that asked me to bring to this body, regardless of its implications on that particular painting. He had originally formulated a process that would have this body interpreting what is and isn't art, and what is a mural and what is a sign. And that sort of arbitrary process, to me, did not seem appropriate, nor do I particularly want to be telling everybody what is and isn't art. I just don't think that's appropriate. It's an arbitrary and capricious system, whereas if we have definitions in place, we all should be able to understand exactly what is a sign and what is a mural. And that's why I brought this forward for this board's consideration. In the process of doing this, I read far more sign and mural ordinances and legal language, the Reed v. Gilbert case, and Why More Dogs. There were several others regarding electric companies and how to best proceed with this, and that Reed v. Gilbert is really the most recent landmark case, and it probably would behoove us to review the entire sign ordinance to align it with Reed v. Gilbert. And then in that process, also develop a definition of public art, mural. However, I think the Planning Commission would choose to define it. I think that would be very wise, forward-thinking, proactive on our part to be able to address this going forward.
Then I would just ask, Planning Commission has a few things on their table, including the comprehensive plan, which I believe to be your top priority. Several zoning amendments, the so-called May amendments. I'm not sure what year the May goes to.
1914.
Yeah, 1914.
I think it's at least 3 years.
So if you are to for review of the entire sign article of the zoning ordinance, perhaps in that you give them an idea of where it falls on your understanding of their priorities. So they don't jump ahead of everything else, unless that's what you want.
I think this should come after the items you just discussed myself.
I mean, I think they need to be taken in the order in which they arrive at the bottom. And if that chairman should feel differently.
If I could, if I could weigh in a little bit on that. What we saw, and this is Rich John McCarthy's not here to say anything, but we had discussed this back in those days. I was on the Planning Commission, and what the small localities like Rappahannock does, and Fauquier for that matter, since none of this stuff is copyrighted, we wait for the bigger guys that have a staff of attorneys like Fairfax or maybe Prince William. They work up something, maybe with this DNL or local government association, and then we just kind of, pick and choose some of the words that we want in there, and we make an ordinance for ourselves. That hasn't been done, except maybe with this Norfolk thing. And that's where we really are. So it's no slight on this county government. We just don't have the staff to commit a bunch of people to working on something like this.
I think I read in the course of reviewing some things in connection with the LGA provisions the other night that Chesapeake had undertaken a comprehensive sign ordinance, and that might be a good model that I believe I found in my reading.
So I guess after saying those things, I think we should put this at the bottom of the list. Get those other things worked through first.
So would you like me to just generally refer to them? Is this a matter you'd like to place in a motion?
I guess that
It makes it very clear what my directions are.
I make a motion that we forward this to the Planning Commission with the understanding that this does not take precedent with what they already have on their agenda.
I'll second for purposes of discussion.
And I have discussion questions, Mr. Chairman. Just for point of clarification then, you're not suggesting a slip behind some of these other listed things like solar farms and wind generator farms, are you?
I think it should all go all at the same time to the Planning Commission, and they can, some of them may be more challenging to work through than others. Some of them, there may be models out there that they can pull and work through relatively quickly, whereas others may not.
So what I've done today is I sent a memo to the Planning Commission to let them know these 4 items were discussed by the board and being referred to the Planning Commission to review. Of course, they have a lot of items to work on, but that was very general. And so as specificity comes around, if there are details relative to sign mural that you want to convey, then I just need to know how to do that.
So the motion on the floor, are we, a little fuzzy on it, are we directing the Planning Commission to consider this, I think I heard to the bottom of the list. I'm not sure what that means, because this is a matter that's at the top of the list for the community.
No, I don't think so. The comp plan is at the top of the list. And then those May amendments from 3 or 4 years ago that we've been informed of this thing. We've got to get our zoning ordinance up to date before we start. We continue to piecemeal. And we haven't brought it up to date. We still not have a public hearing where we have changed some of the language in there. It's 30 years old. The Virginia Department of Highways no longer exists and hasn't since probably '84 when Joe Boliles was governor. So when we adopted that 86 zoning ordinance, it was actually obsolete language then. I'm saying, the board, I wasn't here, none of us were here on the board at that time, but it was obsolete language at that time we adopted it. So that shows you how far out of alignment our ordinance is with proper nomenclature.
Now, the Planning Commission has a work session on Wednesday, correct?
That is correct.
And the purpose of that work session, I think if I remember seeing the agenda, is to talk about the comprehensive plan.
It's comp plan and the zoning amendments.
All right, so those two.
Their hands are full before they get to this subject.
And those subjects are already underway and have been for some time.
We think we need to complete that before we move on to these. The solar and wind power farms, they may find out that that's going to take them a while. Maybe it would work with the sign ordinance before then.
Understood.
The sign ordinance is out of the way and has been for several years. Well, I guess for at least 4.
So I guess while we're in the middle of that, I'll just update the board and public relative to the resolution that was passed at the last meeting, speaking to the ordinance change for the tourist homes, BBs, boarding homes in the agriculture and conservation district. The issue that with the ordinance, when it was changed to 2 and 5 in 2010, and there was a advertising issue, the board referred that to the Planning Commission. They had 100 days to hold a public hearing, refer back, or else.
But this particular subject, that is part of those main amendments.
Yeah, so I just want to let you know that is scheduled and they plan to hold that public hearing on October 17th. And it is my intent to have the public hearing at this board on November 5th and just get that off the books.
And the regional commission has gotten all of their information back on the comprehensive plan, census and all that we can.
They have the data we're incorporating into the documents right now.
Will that be ready by the 3rd?
No, the Planning Commission will be focusing on chapters 6, 7, 8.
Right, okay. So with respect to what's been brought up here in Reed versus the town of Gilbert and the local government attorney's model, the Planning Commission would consider both of those as they kind of look at, or did we just give them direction to do something one over the other?
Well, that was really the crux of what I wanted the board to provide direction, if you had direction. If you had a thought of one way was, you were more inclined to have them look one way versus the other. But if you would like them to do the research and then you keep it open-ended for them and they come back with a recommendation to you. But if you already know one way or the other is your preferred and they recommend a different way, by the time the public hearing gets to you, there's a lot of people waste a lot of time.
Personally, I like the idea of carving out a separate definition for public art, which looks like it's under the local government attorney's model, but I don't know how other board members feel. If you're looking for direction from the board to the planning commission, I don't know, Mr. Parrish, you're on the planning commission. You got a thought on this?
Not really. I think this is the type of thing that we would refer to them to get their input on.
That's fine. And that's valuable input to them, that they're free to research either path or some other path that's not been identified and isn't a non-starter when it gets here. So there's a motion and a second to do something.
It's on the bottom of the deck.
You mean below the comp plan and the amendment?
That's all I was looking for, is what's the definition of that? So,
Comp plan amendment.
so we can say to be considered after the comp plan amendments.
Which are already underway.
Right.
How about this, we have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Very good. Next item. Mr. Lozinski, code of conduct.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the last meeting, I think it was discussed that we would come back with some examples of either codes of conduct or codes of ethics, with the idea that this board would either review them, look at them here this evening and decide whether or not one model was better than another and adopt it, or possibly that there was a hybrid of some sort. We've heard of another effort in the community to put forward a draft of what they think the code of ethics might look like. Maybe we should also welcome any other individuals or any other groups out there that may also want to put something forward. I'm still resolute, Mr. Chairman. This is good governance. This is not creating the wheel. I think we have talked over the last couple of years about how far behind we are in certain things. Just talked about it with respect to the comprehensive plan and performance evaluations. I lump this in there too, as far as having a code of ethics. And by way of example, I found another, we were presented, this board was presented one in 2017 by the prior county administrator that we didn't act on. I provided an example here of one from Fairfax County. Mr. Curry provided an example from where he came from in Gloucester County. So clearly there are probably many more examples out there. So I would suggest perhaps that we move on this quickly and take any other code of ethics or code of conduct documents that the community wants to put forward for consideration, and the board take the time to look at these and come back possibly as early as next month in November and bring this forward for discussion and hopeful adoption, because I think we need it.
Mr. Curry, as I was looking through this, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I did wonder if Ms. May might not be able to handle this and really do a wonderful job with it. I know she's technically in personnel and special projects, and I think this would be right up her avenue if she were willing to take it on.
I would say she certainly could, so long as you don't mind staff telling the board what your ethics should be.
Right.
Well, we do have several things in front of us that I think we can do further reading beyond that and also give feedback as to what we would like the direction of it to be. And
yeah, without a doubt, if of the examples that have been provided or others that you come across, if there are portions or flavors that you come across that you think are appropriate for Rappahannock, then staff can certainly do the legwork and pull something together of your vision. I'd just rather it not be staff's vision.
right. I'll just say my personal reading of these was that I've worried that draft 102 was restrictive and possibly overreaching, unnecessarily redundant with FOIA and COIA and things that could be briefly stated, state code, and just general law that we need to uphold as citizens, and that could be greatly simplified. And at 5 pages, I just thought it was a little cumbersome and could be a shorter form, for me personally. Fairfax ethics conduct, that seemed to be geared more toward employees than elected officials. And again, it seemed sort of, anytime I see there's bullets and arrows and multiple items vying for your attention on a page, I just think that it could be done more elegantly, and I think that we can do it better. And
I'll take note of that.
Tell the board I said so. And in terms of Gloucester, I first wanted to ask, did you write these, or were you involved in these in any way? Because sometimes when you're reading very serious things, you find a little joke in them. And number 8.
Wait, which document is this?
Number 8 on the standards of conduct. It says it 3 different ways, and it just made me laugh. It says, be concise, stay on topic, get to the point. And that you could take 3 different ways to say, be concise. I just kind of thought, maybe this is not the document for me. But I liked the direction of it, but just, again, I just think that perhaps it's a good jumping off point for us to invite and get something better. And I would like it, if possible, to have a nod to our history of cooperation in the county. And that's my thoughts on the matter.
Would this not be a good thing for our recently formed code committee to look at?
Rules committee?
Or rules committee, yes. Because I have to agree with many things that Ms. Smith just said. The Fairfax Code of Ethics says that it was expanded to bring in volunteers and elected officials, but it was primarily set up, it looks like, for employees.
Yeah, I believe the Gloucester documents were solely for the board.
Yeah, the Code of Ethics for the board.
And they adopted these every January at their organizational meeting. A tweak here and there.
But the board is, elected officials already take an oath of office when they get elected and get sworn in. And then the state code basically covers most of the stuff that's in this.
I think, the intent here is, in a lot of ways, I believe, less for you and more for the public to understand your intent. And the public isn't adept at digging into state code and finding all of that. And this is, if you can find a concise way to show the citizens, this is who we are and what we stand by, that they can very quickly digest, I think that is valuable. Which is probably not 5 pages long.
I was going to say, to me, that's 1 page front and back at the very least.
Well, that's Gloucester Board of Supervisors Code of Ethics. It's, I guess, a page and a half.
And I'm sure there are many other examples, I would not be opposed to the Rules Committee looking at this as long as they came back at our next meeting with a work product to consider, and that we would have an opportunity to look at it as a board and amend it if we so needed.
We always do that. I think we could do something. I don't know if Mr. Judge's schedule would allow.
You participate with the Rules Committee to help develop this Code of Ethics, Code of Conduct?
Oh, absolutely.
Looks like we got a consensus.
Just have to find the time.
Yeah, we can make time.
All right. Well, we got these as the starting points, and then whatever this citizen group would want to forward to us if they have something. And we could, on our own, they got different, other counties or communities. See what they do all around us. I think we can condense it. We can, be concise.
Concise, be brief, get to the point. Stay on topic. like expository, evolving discussions, so.
Sounds like number 8 was written for me.
I know.
You have to meet the county attorney there to understand. All right, sir.
Next item. The resolution regarding BZA member David Connor. Any comments from the board?
Oh, Chairman, I guess I'll make a comment because it did start with me and my taking up a request from a citizen who felt that these remarks went beyond the pale. I believe you had agreed at the last meeting to draft a letter. And I know this item has your name next to it, Mr. Chairman. I know that you considered counsel on that letter, and we now have before us what we have. I don't know if you want to talk about the resolution, or if you want me to have Mr. Goff talk about it, or if you would like me to give you my opinion.
Well, I think Mr. Goff should handle that.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, we have a precedent here. You and I were both on the board at the time it happened. The board brought 3 members of the planning commission in, and it did not include Mr. Brown. So just in case anybody wonders about that. And we brought in 3 members of the planning commission in a closed session to discuss items with them, with the board. And that's how we handle something. And we did not handle this that way. Now, either Mr. Connick is a county official because he's on BZA, or he's not because he's appointed by the judge. And if he's a county official, we did not extend to him the same process that we had already established with our planning commission members. And last month, when we discussed this issue, and it was decided that you would write a letter, if Mr. Goff maybe give you some assistance or working together, you were supposed to write a letter as a supervisor, and now we have in front of us a resolution that would require action. The roll call resolution would require action by this body, which would make an official action of this body, which is exactly what we discussed that we did not want to do last month. So it looks like to me, Mr. Chairman, that you and Mr. Goff have exceeded your authority from last month. And again, this is in opposition to a precedent that this board set several years ago when you and I were both on. And if we go back and look at that, those were some very grave matters that we discussed with those members.
Well, I did write a letter, Mr. Fraser, but it wasn't as technical as it had to be for legal language. And it was modified.
Well, if it's a letter, I don't know what kind of technical language it would need in it. But again, this is an official action that you're proposing for the board to take.
Yeah, we have a resolution here. We made it there.
That could be actionable. Not only would this board be taking action on it, but it could be something that would wind up in court later. The BZA did something very similar to this to the very same individual, and after spending about $10,000 of the county taxpayers' money, it was rescinded. And I was trying to get this board to stop that then when it authorized payment for something that the former county attorney had done at that time that he wasn't authorized to do when he put the bill in. And it wound up costing this county taxpayers about $10,000 to get it resolved. And they wound up rescinding it. And we could be very well be heading down that same path. And I think almost everything that was said here tonight in opposition to this thing is true. It really looks bad that a board that is encumbered into 2 or 3 different lawsuits with this attorney representing the plaintiffs, we're taking this action against them without giving them the same due process that we gave to other members of this community several years ago. I thought we established a precedent then.
I don't know if anybody else have any comment?
Well, I think that this is culmination of our not, working together. And this has just kind of, gradually come up to the surface. We've got to the point where we not only don't work together, we interrupt each other, we raise our voice and yell, and it's just like people get entrenched in one side or the other, rather than as Naomi Johnson often says, agree to disagree, which would be a lot more palatable, in my opinion. I really don't know what's appropriate in a situation like this. I think it to basically send some message that we, as a county government, do not condone behavior, that we disassociate ourselves from this kind of behavior. I don't necessarily see any harm in it. I don't know if this is the exact right way to do it. I don't know, but I don't really see any real harm in sending a message that this behavior is not the way that we want to be, that we want to act. And so I think it kind of sends a message to the public in general that we, all of us, are going to strive to behave like adults, and this might be a tiny step toward restoring civility that in the not too distant past we enjoyed as a county, as a board, and I would love to see some of the general anger dissipate, because anger is not productive, and it doesn't prove anything. There is no punishment here. It's just basically a simple not condoning and a disassociation, and that's it. And I've known David for a long time. I take whatever he says with a grain of salt, because I know in general he doesn't really mean that much harm, but he's just got to learn to be a little more careful, and what he puts in emails and what he says to people. It would be it'd be nice for all of us to think about what we're going to say before we actually say it.
But this is the only name here. What if we included your name in the mayor's name?
Well, I definitely think you should reprimand me for urinating in Mr. Glayman's parking lot.
Well, just outside, 3 or 4 months ago, you got right up in my face out here in front of the courthouse door and said that, you remember what you said to me? You think that's funny?
Yeah. Am I not allowed to have a sense of humor?
You didn't say it in a funny manner. You got right up in my face like
Yeah.
you got intimidated.
Yeah. Well.
Do you remember what you said?
Yeah. So, so what?
So what?
Yeah, so what?
Well, then I think we should.
I did not insult you.
You used the same type of language with me. You used the same type of language with me.
I used the F word.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Twice.
Right. Man to man.
Right here.
Right. Right.
You think it's funny?
Well, no, not like that. And if
then a good mayor stands up here, right here in front of it, and uses a vulgar term for poultry litter. In our meeting.
Excuse me, what did I say?
Poultry litter. But you didn't say it quite like that.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
No, wait a minute.
Hold on,
No.
stop, please.
I'm just saying, Mr. Chairman.
Order. You get your say, Mr. Frazier, you always do. Yes.
I'm not done.
It seems, Mr. Chairman, since I have the floor, that when Mr. Parrish and Mr. Frazier are arguing about is of the matter that we considered in the last agenda item, and that is the code of conduct. I think a lot of what's been put out there about how we treat each other and how we speak to each other and how we address the community, or how we would like the community to be respectful as well. I think that all gets incorporated into a code of ethics and a code of conduct, as well as Conflict of Interest and Freedom of Information Act, Sunshine Laws. This matter is a specific instance involving a citizen, whether it's of this county or not. There's one example where it's a citizen in this county, another one where it's not. Where I think clearly this board needs to say that it does in this resolution that it just does not condone this disrespectful language. And at the risk of opening up a can of worms, I'm just going to say this: there was a gentleman who once in a circumstance like this who said, what's pornography? Well, I don't know. I can't define it, but I know pornography when I see it. And when I see some insulting email that uses that kind of language, I feel it's gone over the line. And I would hope that this board would feel the same way. So that's why this letter, now resolution, has been crafted, because there's a specific example here that I think the board wants to point out in saying that it just doesn't condone this kind of disrespectful attitude and language when dealing with people in the public when you're in a position of authority with this county. Like, what kind of message is sent if we don't say something like that?
We said that, but then y'all took a step further. Again, the chair was not authorized, neither was the county attorney authorized by this board to do this. And we've already had a process that we established some years ago.
I was not aware of that process, Mr. Frazier. Nobody explained it to me, and I think what the chair did was he consulted with the county attorney, who recommended that it be drafted in this fashion rather than in the form of a letter. And
Do we need to sit down and do a code of conduct first?
I think that would be very helpful.
But then this would be retroactive if you did this. And if it's going to be retroactive on that individual, then it should be retroactive on all of us.
Right now, I think I'm just concerned that it'll be viewed as arbitrary. I find myself in a position where I did second an appointment to a committee last month for an individual that I've heard use foul language. And I had a deep moment of self-reflection of where do we stand on this? I think the conduct code is critical. I think if that's in place, we will have something to hold people to. I am concerned that singling out one individual for this type of treatment will be trouble. And I do think that there's a better way. I think there's a smarter way forward with the code of conduct, and perhaps also reaching back to Ms. Dobson with just a letter to let her know that we do appreciate her coming forward to us, and we are working very hard to get a code of conduct in place. That would be my recommendation.
I can't help but think this board is being intimidated by, this person could potentially bring a lawsuit. It is particularly litigious, and we already know that's the case. Are we backing down because of the fear aspect of this thing?
I'm sorry. I don't think we're backing down. I think real crux here is that Mr. Connick has been Mr. Connick ever since I've known him. And that's a long time. He's certainly cussed a lot of people out before, but he wasn't the county representative. He's now on the BZA, and he's representing the county. And that's why I'm going to make a motion to approve this resolution.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Discussion.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, there's all kinds of problem with this. The second paragraph, it says, whereas, that said, meeting members of the public spoke during the public comment period, voicing their objections to the statements which this board has verified. How did you verify it, Mr. Chairman?
Oh, are you saying, what a cuss word is?
I'm saying, how did you verify all these statements? Because once y'all vote on this tonight, it becomes a legal action of this body. What did y'all do to verify anything?
Mr. Chairman,
It's not like every other motion.
Well, there's the emails are part of what's on board docs here.
The data.
You only got one side of it. You don't have anything that came before or after that. You took a snapshot out of time. I'm telling you, this is not going to come off good. When you make statements like this, and Mr. Goff, as an attorney, you should know better than this, sir, because you know that we didn't verify this. Mr. Goff.
Is this legal, Mr. Goff?
Yes.
I asked you a question. Don't you know better than this? It says that this was verified. This board did not verify this information.
They're attached as far as I know.
I'm sorry?
The verbiage is attached.
But you only got a snippet of it. You don't have the whole track of this thing.
Well, what's that have to do with verification?
All you've done is verify this one sentence.
That's enough.
Yeah, what else do you need?
You don't have the whole picture.
So?
So this is, that right now is on video, and it's going to look like intimidation on your part, retaliation.
Well, it may look like that to somebody.
But you don't suffer the consequences. It's this board that will. You as the county attorney or the employee of this board, you're recommending them do something that may come back in the form of legal action against this board that you will have no part of.
Well, I just disagree with that, Mr. Frazier, and I really don't intend to engage in an argument with you about it.
But you don't have an argument against it. It's a fact. You have no legal obligation here. This body does if it approves this.
I can't imagine what that would be.
Another lawsuit that we may wind up losing like the BZA did for the very same thing.
Now, Mr. Frazier, the BZA settled that case.
They settled it because they couldn't win, and you know that, sir.
No, I don't know that. So I just, that's something.
After spending $10,000 of the hard-earned taxpayers' money, if they thought that they had a chance to win it, I think they would have.
Well, I don't know what their counsel told them, so I can't speak to that. Even if I did, I probably shouldn't speak to that. So.
All I know is they're back at the same point they were in September of 3 years ago when all this started, and it never should have happened.
I did want to add that when I vote, it will not reflect that I condone this sort of language or this sort of treatment of our constituents or populace or anyone that we're dealing with, our employees or each other. But there just has to be a better way to do this.
I'm sure there is.
But it looks like there's a motion and seconds. I hope that we'll find a better way as we proceed.
Well, do we have a better way yet?
As far as I heard, we just made a motion in the past to work on a code of conduct, and that should be something that we should strive to and have in place to avoid these sort of situations in the future. And like I said, I think a letter to Ms. Stockton may be in order, but something official like this that singles out one individual for treatment that you've not given to any other individual, it's a precedent, and I know that this body will do what it's going to do, and I just wanted to make it clear that I don't find it acceptable to treat people that way. I don't expect it to be treated that way. And when I made that appointment, or made that second for that appointment last month, to someone that I heard use bad language before, I thought it was due to frustration. And the way to perhaps overcome some of this is to work together. And if we all would work together and see a little bit more of the human in each other, we would be a lot more successful. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Roll call, sir.
Oh, roll call. Mr. Frazier.
Nay.
Mr. Lozinski.
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Nay.
Mr. Parrish.
Aye.
And I vote aye also.
And we can have a motion to send.
Next item?
What was that?
It may need to be on the next agenda, because it was trying to agenda. A letter to the stock.
You could do it for passing unanimously. If you could add it to the agenda, then you could pass it unanimously. Yeah. You could.
Amending the agenda enough to make a motion to send Ms. Dawson a letter.
I would entertain a motion to send Ms. Doxson a letter to, moving this issue forward with our board. And, what I want to say, that we have, that we understand her concerns and we are undertaking to establish a code of conduct through our rules committee.
Perfect. I'll second that. Well, first of all, we need to amend the agenda, right?
I think that would be the most appropriate.
Or we can just all, if it's unanimous, and it's a done deal.
I'd like to amend the agenda to include a motion to that effect.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I vote aye also.
I'd like to see what the letter says we just got in trouble with that this time. You were supposed to write a letter, and you came back with a resolution. I'd like to see what was supposed to be included.
Well, I think I was pretty specific about what the letter
I know, I
said.
thought we were specific last month that we weren't gonna do what we just did, but
But and there was no motion at the other meeting directing action, so this makes it very clear what the action would be. If there is, in fact, of course, this motion was to add it to the agenda, but should you pass a motion after this and make it very
okay, so
clear?
you agree that somebody acted without authority to do so then?
Well, no, I would tell you that any board member and any constitutional officer can place anything on the agenda they wish. So they did.
It should have been new business instead of old business.
I'll keep that in mind for next month.
I think there's a motion and a second to add the item to the agenda.
And we voted, everybody said aye. So now,
Everybody say aye.
And did you vote, Mr. Frazier?
I'll vote, but I wanna make sure that we don't wind up with a resolution again.
Let's maybe work on the letter this month and work to pass it this next month. I'd like to see what it says, but I think that those things that I enumerated are what I would like to see in the letter. I don't think that's overreaching. I don't think that's underreaching. I think that's an appropriate response, and I would definitely put my name to that letter.
So
how about write that letter?
So to
What you
avoid
said was
a
pretty appropriate.
repeated,
Yeah.
the last meeting, perhaps a motion asking Ms. Smith to write a letter for consideration by the board at the next meeting.
I'm going to have to watch this videotape. It's not bad enough that I have to live through it. I'm going to have to see what I said. I will do that.
Point of clarity here. The vote that you just took before adding to the amendment, you were voting what, on the resolution, or you were voting for a letter to Chris Doxson?
Well, you have to vote.
The resolution was first.
The resolution, okay.
I have to vote to amend the agenda.
I got that one.
So will there be a motion regarding the letter?
I'll compile the letter for next meeting if that's agreeable to everyone. And that way we're all on the same page. We all understand what's being signed.
State police investigation.
Well, Mr. Chairman, when I asked to put this on the agenda, I fully expected that we would have a result of the investigation. I think we were sort of told we would have something by the end of September. I'm going to assume, Mr. Curry, that we haven't seen anything yet?
I have not seen it.
All right. I don't know if this board feels that after 18 months of waiting for the results of this investigation, that this board should send something to the investigating authority requesting that it be anything from please wrap this up to please give us a status report. This is, I mean, I think 18 months would be more than enough time. There's either one or two things, I guess, happening here. There's either smoke with no fire or there's a big fire, and either way, we really need to know about it. And we just don't have anything after this thing was opened in the spring of 2017. So I don't know how other board members feel. I had this on the agenda last month. I decided to pull it off. So I heard that we were getting pretty close to getting something, but here we sit again 30 days later and we have nothing. And I'll just leave it at that and see if board members have thoughts on it.
Yeah, I'd like to know the results of it too, but I don't know what authority we have to even ask. If it's under investigation, you can't give us any information.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything we can do but wait.
I guess I'd like to know if it is an active investigation. Maybe we can ask that.
Or can we, I don't know, Mr. Goff, is it appropriate to ask you to maybe find out where we are with this thing? Or is that not an appropriate request?
He's accused himself, but this was the contact club.
Yeah, once I get out, I think that I try not to in any way exert any kind of pressure or influence, just let things take their course. You know, I don't know, I wish I had more information for you, but I don't.
Well, it's a sword hanging over this county government as to whether or not it's done things properly, and if it hasn't, what is it, and what could we do to fix it, and if it's nothing, then I think we need to know that too. So I'm just very frustrated, I guess. And I haven't forgotten about it. I think a lot of people have forgotten about this thing. It needs closure.
Maybe a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'm second that.
Motion made, second, all those in favor say aye.
Yes.